Hit play.
Cool. Go ahead.
Let's go look for Santa. Is he here?
I think I see it.
All right, and we're live. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the free Assange online vigil series, and Merry Christmas. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and do make sure, thank you guys so much for joining us. I just want to say Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. We will be having a New Year special, though, next Wednesday. So we kind of hit both holidays. But this is our last episode of the year. Of course, it just kind of landed that way. But tonight we will be talking about just everything that took place in 2019, also what we expect to happen in 2020 and throughout the decade into 2030, some of our predictions of what we expect to potentially happen. It will be interesting one day to eventually look back on those sorts of things. Tonight we will, of course, be recapping the hearing that took place last week. And we will also talk about the article that was just released where Christine Assange, Julian's mother, gave a rare interview and broke her silence. We will also discuss that. And we have two very special guests that are joining us this evening. I have met both of them this year and was able to work with both of them. So that has definitely been a pleasure. But before we get to that, I want to update you guys on some stats here. So it is 258 days since the brutal arrest of Julian Assange and 3,305 days of his unlawful and arbitrary detention. And as for Chelsea Manning, it is 287 days in jail, and she is now up to $178,000 in fines. So as we progress through this holiday season, do be thinking about these stats, and if you're able to, please help out by donating. Of course, not everybody is able to, but if you can, please do so because it's very helpful. And even writing letters during this time is beneficial because it also lifts their spirits. So before we get into news and exactly what we have gone through this past year, I want to introduce both of our guests this evening. Our first guest of the evening is Misty Winston, and she is a mom, a wife, and activist from Ohio. And then also we are joined by Kendra Christian, who is an activist and founder of Denver Action to Free Assange, and you could follow them at DNB Free JA. And welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Thank you very much for coming on this evening. If you could you start a little bit, Misty, about your background and kind of what brought you into being a Assange supporter?
Well, I really started, I think like most people, I heard about Assange with the Chelsea Manning leaks, and I was already really against the Iraq war and everything. And when all of that stuff came out, I realized how critical journalism like WikiLeaks is to the world, really. We don't get that kind of truth telling in obviously in the mainstream media, but really anywhere. I mean, this isn't just, a journalist telling a story, it's source documents. And I think that's like something that's really kind of invaluable to society. And so that's kind of where I started. I've always been a supporter of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, but then seeing the just horrific treatment that he's gone through over the past, almost decade now, that support has only strengthened. And I just realized how critical it is to fight for, and it's not just about him, although his life is obviously worth fighting for, but it's really for journalism in general. Like it's really under attack, and it's become a really critical issue that we have to really face and fight, because things are going to get really bad if we go down this road.
Yeah, so Kendra, also you too, if you could talk about, well, I know you've been on the show before, like Misty, if you could just kind of recap more about Denver Free Assange and what you guys do and how people in the Denver area can get involved.
Yeah, so basically when when Assange was arrested, right before that, I had found Unity for J. And then right after he was arrested, that's when I started looking frantically. I kind of had the idea that there'd already be something there, that there were a lot of people already working on this, and I would just join something. And then I didn't find anything. I reached out to a lot of people, and then finally I found actually the San Francisco group. And so she kind of helped me go. And then I started my first rally thinking like it might only even be me there. And but it wasn't. We had a decent group. And so we've been growing since then. We try to have at least 1 or 2 rallies a month. We have a good core group of supporters now. So the best way to get in touch with us is, I have my email address up here too, is to email me or get on Twitter. That's where we post all of our events. Unity for J also supports us, as well as Action for Assange, getting that stuff out. So yeah, things have been going well here. We have a good core group that shows up to rallies. That continues to grow. People also do a lot of individual actions, and we really try to gather those email addresses to, push out individual actions that people can take. I think that it's been, this is kind of my first thing in activism, at least politically. So it's been a rather steep learning curve this year, but I've had a lot of support from, honestly, you guys, from Unity for J, from just people on Twitter, seeing like stuff that other people are doing and copying it. And then, we have a great group here. So looking forward to the next year as well. We have a lot of good ideas for actions, different locations to do our rallies. We're always trying new things just to, see what works, like throwing a lot of stuff out there to see what works.
So what does work the best? Like, what kind of successes have you guys found so far?
It's funny because the same thing, I'll hear from people like, oh, well, what are we doing? It's not so great to be, we need to do more than being out here. And then I'll hear from other people, well, it's so important that we're out here, and you could have, you could start a conversation the same way with one person and have it work, and another person and have it not work, And so some of my best successes is to just really kind of start by asking questions to see where someone's at. Mainly we have a lot of interaction with people. That's part of why we have our stuff at the Capitol. It has foot traffic. So we have a lot of people in and out there. So you could just kind of try to see where someone's at. The best success that I've had with people who are really shut off completely is to just say, you know what, don't take my word for it, and send them links with the source documents. The Niels Melter, those reports have helped so much because it really outlines things super well, because it can be a pretty complicated case to go over with somebody on the street, so we, on our flyers, we have information for people to look at. But, I've had people who've been really, with all the smears, believing all those things. And it's been most successful to say, hey, you know what, when you have time, just read this stuff, just read it and see what you think. And I've had, I've changed some minds that way. And I think that's been helpful. That's worked, and not on everybody though. So depends.
Yeah, it doesn't work on everyone. And I think when you first engage with people, of course, you could see if there's somebody that's willing to listen to the message. I find it that oftentimes the people who are most willing to hear about this are oftentimes those who don't know anything about Julian Assange. And you could be the very first person to kind of plant the appropriate information into their minds because they haven't been exposed to all this crazy misinformation, like these fake, non-existent rape charges that the media has made up. That wasn't even a thing, and it's been widely reported. It sticks. Misty, what about your experience? I did step out for a second, so forgive me if you did already touch on this, but what do you find works for you, and what is some of the certain actions that you have taken?
think one of the biggest things, and one of the easiest things really, is I have a ton of WikiLeaks merch. I wear shirts all the time. I have a free Assange sticker on my cell phone. And people will see that. And like, for example, I went to the chiropractor and I had a WikiLeaks shirt on, and he was like, "Oh, hey, that's that guy that's like in jail or something, right?" And we had like this conversation about it. And he was kind of one of those people who hadn't really heard much about it. He kind of knew who he was, but didn't really have a lot of information. So I just kind of, went over. Obviously, it's a chiropractor appointment. I don't have an hour, but I just, gave him a quick rundown of like what was going on and, everything that was happening, and gave him some websites to go to check out for information. And he was really receptive to it. So it's something as easy as just like wearing a shirt and starting a conversation is so simple. And and you're not always going to get somebody who's like happy to see your shirt. Like there's been a couple of times where I've had people, say, "Oh, you like a rapist," and you're going to get that. And that's, just kind of something you're going to have to deal with. But even if you can just do something as simple as wear a shirt and start a conversation, it's really that easy.
And so Kendra, I noticed with, because I remember when you guys started up and you guys had a really good response, and like you said, that you keep growing. Do you think Denver itself is a more progressive area, so that there are people that are more receptive to the message and wanting to get behind it and stand up for Julian? Do you think that has helped you guys grow? Just your location and kind of Colorado in general being a little bit different than maybe most states?
Yeah, I think people are pretty active here. That's one thing. A lot of members in our group are already active in a lot of other groups. We just had someone show up that I haven't seen for a little while, and he's like, I'm in so many other things, doing that. And so that could be part of it. One thing too that's really encouraging is even there's that kind of silent majority, I guess, that you don't necessarily hear from. It's not on social media. That's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's just that stuff away because it's just to that, you know what I mean? Garbage to them. And so we've seen an increase in and I've asked people, I'm like, am I crazy, or are we getting like a lot more honks lately and things like that when we're out there? And we really are. And so that's, I do think that might have something to do with it. I know with our group too, we really try to keep politics like as much out of it as possible, to bring as many people in and just keep people focused, because it's so not, especially in the election season, that's not the easiest thing to do. But that's nice too. We have a lot of people who are involved in different campaigns, like spreading the word. And so I think it's different people in this group taking a lot of their own individual actions to bring people in. So.
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, this year I actually got to meet both of you guys. In particular, got to work with both of you, which was great, especially in Denver. I got to really work with you. We walked around and we were holding signs and we talked to people on the street. I gave you guys some yellow wristbands, and to my co-host, I will be sending you guys wristbands. I promise.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's so.
Well, but I have more. I have other ones also to give you guys. So speaking of wristbands, one thing that Andrew and I did this year was we went to the Jimmy Dore show and we passed out wristbands. And that was in Chicago. And that is actually where we met Misty. She was sitting in front of us, was a huge supporter of Julian Assange, she told us. And also too, we told her, we're Action for Assange. And she said, I'm already following you guys on Twitter. So she's been a supporter of ours and with us in this fight since day one. Those shows, of course, are awesome. And that was an awesome show. Andrew, if you kind of want to talk about maybe some of the actions that we took while we were in Chicago and how people can maybe model their actions off of the things that we had done. And we, in fact, ran into some trouble at that time. And this again was in July. This was around the 13th and 14th of July that this happened. But Andrew, I think, could tell the story quite well, because it shows that when you persevere and when you have the facts on your side, you can push back and you can be successful.
So yeah, when we went out to the Jimmy Dore show, Taylor and I had decided that we wanted to engage Jimmy's audience. So we went there, we passed out we passed out signs for people to hold up. We passed out wristbands. We shook people's hands. We talked with them about why we were there and what we hoped that they could do in their communities being politically active. So that was really cool. It was a really, I don't want to say like targeted event, but it was a very like audience specific thing in the way that we engaged people there. But overall, Taylor and I have gone, I think at this point to like 5 or 6 cities and put up posters throughout it. The most memorable one of this year was probably out in Oberlin, where I had actually gotten a citation for literally just putting a poster up, like I put in the back of the cop car, all this fun shit. And that escalated into me getting a second one after a city council meeting. And then, at long story short, I owe the city of Oberlin about like $400 for putting up maybe a dozen posters, and they only cited me for 2 of them. So there's always fun ways to fight back, because at this point now I get to go in front of the judge again and ask why I have to pay $400 for the right to engage the city in speech. So it just really creates these fun little like pockets of activism where you can engage people in local positions of authority to think about how their actions ripple across the rest of society.
Oh, I'll jump in for an awkward silence.
I love it.
My personal activism at this point is limited to my show, but I do use my show as a platform to speak out about what's going on with Julian Assange, what's going on with Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond. I'm like one of 4 people that brought up Jeremy Hammond when he got transported from Oklahoma to Virginia. I have people on, like just this last Sunday, Elizabeth Voss came back on. We had a great conversation as always, and been able to interview some goddamn authorities on the subject. I'm looking forward to the direction that the show gets to take as the world gets more absurd. I don't have a whole lot of Christmas spirit about the world getting any less absurd. So as long as that continues, I will be able to bring on the kinds of independent journalists and critical thinkers that have the sort of takes that I respect because of their honesty.
Well, and just if I could jump in here real quick, I know that's, your show is really helpful, and these, people that are talking about things like that, because in a lot of ways it's, I think that for people out there, until their groups start to build or whatever, it can feel a little bit lonely. I mean, even with the Unity for Jay, I had some friends that I would talk to, but it felt before I found those vigils like, gosh, are we the only people that can, what's going on here? So it's helpful to have that. And your show the other day with Elizabeth Lavas, it was really good. It put into, words eloquently things that I think, all the time. And so it's helpful. It's really helpful to have a good news source and people who are honest and fighting for the truth and aren't afraid to put it out there, because I think I like that you guys bring that up. In independent media, we do still, we still see people trying to save, what they have. And that's, we're all in this together. So it's really important to talk about those things.
Thank you. I always think that self-censorship in independent media is a worthwhile subject to broach, because it compounds. It has a snowball effect. If somebody who has a large platform is self-censoring the hell out of themselves, that will, other people who are trying to make a living that way are going to see that and want to mimic the content that they think in their mind gets them clicks or gets them ad revenue. And if that's discussing the horse race instead of, shining a light on the death of a free press, that's what they're going to do. And it's a shame the way that we went about monetizing thought, and the platforms that gave an avenue for monetized thought.
All right, I did step out for a second here. So Andrew, I didn't get to catch all that you were saying about Chicago in particular. But again, it's a great example of how when you push back and have the facts on your side, you can be successful, like I was saying. So we're talking about independent media here. And another point I want to bring up too is that, you know, as we go into this new year and as this full extradition hearing approaches, it's really important to put the pressure on people in independent media in a kind way, not like a harassing type of way. But if they do, you know, ask for suggestions, suggest that they cover Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning and this extradition hearing and even activism in general. Do that, but of course, be polite about it and not be harassing them per se. But it's a really effective way to get this out there because it's really all that we have at this point.
Yeah, and so one of the big things that we all started this year was this vigil, and we've been going strong for about 6 months now. This is our 25th show or week of shows, because some weeks we've done more than one show. So yeah, we are planning to continue this on into 2020, and I don't know if we want to take kind of a brief overview of kind of the major highlights that have happened to Julian Assange this year. We've had a lot of big things happen. I think we can kind of roll back to really, I mean, as we came into 2019, Julian wasn't in a great position in the embassy. We were hearing that he was going some number of days over the last Christmas holiday without food because his lawyers couldn't visit. Wasn't getting a lot of visitors, as where Christmases before he had people and family coming in. He was still gagged from the internet, not really able to make phone calls as far as we know. I know we did have a Christmas card campaign to send cards to him. And it was never, there was some obscurity on whether he was actually getting his mail at the embassy too. So we started 2019 a little rough for what was the norm in the embassy. And 2018 was kind of a big change in the embassy's atmosphere, environment, and now we know that as far back as 2017 he was being spied on. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about that in any more depth, or if we can kind of start going through the months of 2019 of what was going on there.
I think we can start rolling through the months of 2019.
Yeah, so really there was starting to be a little bit, I mean, it was kind of March, April, beginning of April that we started hearing that Julian and WikiLeaks had thought that something was going to go down. We were having the Unity for J vigils at this time on a weekly basis. And I remember at the beginning of April, we had a very long, I think we hit like 50 hours, maybe 60 that weekend of hosting a vigil. And there were news, press, media at the embassy watching, because we were waiting. We were told he was going to get expelled in a matter of hours, maybe days. And it didn't happen that weekend. And so the news media organizations that were there slowly started to pull away. And we finished that vigil. We thought maybe things were going to change for that next week. We were all still very, very nervous. And then on April 11th is the day it happened, early that morning. At least it was early here in the US, but I think it was about 10:30 London time. And so I don't know if you guys just want to talk about maybe what your reaction was that day that happened, because we didn't all know each other. We didn't do this vigil at that time. So I think for us as activists, and especially in the Free Assange movement, that is a very stark line in the sand for everybody, that They remember where they were. They remember hearing it. They remember their raw reaction to that.
So when I first found out, like when I saw the news that Julian was getting pulled out of the embassy and saw the video of him coming out, it was like I want to say it was a Wednesday that it happened, and then I shifted the gears of my life to be
It was
able to leave
Thursday.
Thursday, to be able to leave Friday night to go to DC to join the protests. And that's really where like the idea for these visuals started, is because people can't just up and leave to go to Washington DC. Like they can't uproot their whole lives to go and do a protest. Like it just doesn't work for people. It doesn't work for the way that our society has been built to function. And that's really where I got the idea of like we just have to do what we can as individuals, to where it's not getting 10 million people in the street in one city on one day. It's getting 100,000 people in the street once a week doing what they can do, more or less trying to resemble the Yellow Vest movement out of France in a way, just trying to get people started and moving on their own. So that was the big thing for me, was just realizing like we can't wait for something big to pop up in a major city and then hope we all can make it at the same time. Like we have to start small and build from there and get individual people acting.
But for me, I think I went through like a dozen emotions within the first 30 minutes after hearing it. I think we were all kind of expecting it. We knew it was coming, but it was still kind of shocking. I think the video was really the shocking part, seeing how horribly he was treated and how terrible he looked and how weak he seemed. And so I was shocked, and then I was horrified, and then I was sad, and then I was pissed off. And it was like this whole gamut of emotions. And it really, honestly though, it just really kind of lit a fire under me. And I felt like now I feel like I just need to do, like, I never feel like I'm doing enough now. Like, I feel like it's become a critical situation. And I feel like I have to just do whatever I can do. I want to do more. And I'm trying to like figure out ways to do that on my own. And you guys are doing a great job with this. And I appreciate you guys letting me come on and have, a platform to speak about it. And Steve, I love your show. You guys are the only ones really who talk about this on a regular basis, which is depressing as hell. But what you guys are doing is critical. And so I appreciate you guys, doing this for us and for letting us come on and talk about it. It's really cool that you guys are doing this.
Rad. No, I'd also like to add that Jason Burmis does a hell of a job covering Julian Assange.
Yes, thank you.
And friend of the Vigil series as well, Jason Burmis. I just went and looked at my YouTube, and I did like an 1.5-hour live stream that day, and it was titled Assange arrested, Team Sanders mute, press freedom hangs in the balance. And again, this is April. We didn't know each other. We had never had a conversation together about what presidential candidates were saying about Julian. But I mean, again, in my mind, if you're the front runner or the most progressive candidate running, you have an obligation to address this.
Agreed.
Yeah. So when I found out, I remember I was up really early that day, but the week prior to that, as Christy was saying, WikiLeaks was warning people that this arrest was going to happen within like the next 7 days, and that they were able to find that out, and they reported that. And then I remember it was the Ecuadorian government pushed back and said, "Oh no, this isn't true." But then I knew at that, I said, no, I said they absolutely are, because they have 100% accuracy rate, an awesome track record. They're not going to get this wrong. And so we kind of felt it coming, and then it happened. But I remember I was on Twitter really early that morning, and I saw somebody posted a tweet that he had been arrested. And I would just remember being like shocked about it. Even though we were well prepared for that to happen, but I remember being quite shocked. And I just kept researching the next hour to see what was happening, what was going on. And then I found out that there was a video, and I was actually quite nervous to watch it. And I watched it, and I found it to be extremely, extremely disturbing what had taken place. I mean, I obviously didn't expect it to be for them to be like gentle with him or kind to him as they were taking him out of the embassy. But once seeing that, I was not prepared for it. And then I knew at that moment that this was extremely, extremely serious. And that was what really encouraged me to become more vocal about this entire issue and to really put my opinions and ideas out there, and that I had to actually do something, because I figured that if this could happen in this way, and they could just go into the embassy, now granted they were invited in, the British police were invited into the embassy. I remember thinking to myself, just hearing that in itself, I thought it was, I thought there's obviously a collaborated effort. If we did not know that before, we surely know it now, because they cannot just, of course, walk into the embassy. That would be an act of war, I believe. So I just remember being shocked, and then really feeling that I had to absolutely do something. And then a couple months later, I was able to connect with Andrew, and we've just been doing this since then, really, and really stepping up.
Yeah, so I was very active in Unity for Jay. I had been doing all sorts of, I mean, I was on the Twitter team. I was doing anything and everything I could. And I remember watching the Reply feed even after, you know, those few days, kind of checking in with it. We saw Cassandra Fairbanks was at the embassy, and she actually talked to the undercover police officers, which we didn't know at the time. But
oh yeah, I remember that.
I remember seeing the video of those guys, and they were very strange. It was really ominous, with just waiting and watching, and every police car that would drive by being like, this is it, this is it. And I had gone to sleep and woken up just a little bit after it happened, and got all messages on Discord blowing up. And I remember watching the video and just kind of going into auto, like, what do we do? We got to get the press release out, kind of just the go, go, go mode. And, you know, after going back, every time I watched the video, it made me sick to see him in that terrible of condition. He could barely open his eyes because he had not been outside yet in years. You know, they just pulled him out. They didn't care that he had not seen sunlight. And, you know, then seeing them carry him and stuff him in the van, and, you know, he's trying to yell, but I mean, who knows how, if you've been inside a room for 7 years, how your speaking voice is probably a little different. And, you know, he was, I don't know, it was so emotionally hard to watch, to see him in the condition he was in, as it is now through this year, as we've seen him decline even more so in Belmarsh. Yeah, I think it wasn't until the end of the day that it really hit me, after we kind of did all the campaign work, and getting the message out, and getting the press release out, and getting statements out, and getting stuff retweeted all day long, that it really hit me that what had happened, and that everything was going to change now, and that how safe the embassy had almost seemed now in comparison, because we had no idea what was coming up, and the process that would proceed. And, you know, the bail charges that followed, the prison sentence, the solitary confinement, and now we're looking at an extradition hearing in 2020. And so it was, I don't want to say the embassy days were comfortable, but it seemed a little safer for him. And then that was pretty terrible for him anyway. So it was, yeah, it was definitely a defining moment for the Free Assange movement and campaign. And I know it brought so many more of you into the fold, and really got people to notice what was happening.
Yeah, I know for me, that was like the main I mean, that was like the moment for me. You know, I had seen those. That's when I started seeing Unity for Jay, is when it was like right before, you know, hey, there's word that something's going to happen right away. And I found those 24-hour vigils, and then seeing him drug out of that embassy, you know, it was such a different person than I had seen before. And I know that that was done also even on purpose, you know, to make him look, I don't know, unattractive, scraggly to people. And it had the exact opposite effect on me. It was just like, oh my gosh, what have we done to this man, this amazing human being who has really done so much on behalf of everybody. And I mean, that's what I really liked. I went through all of the emotions, and then it was like, let's get active. And I liked what you said too, Christy, because that was, I mean, I wasn't, you know, involved and active before. I mean, I always felt like I was supporting WikiLeaks, but maybe not as active as I should. And I felt like, my God, I got caught sleeping while he was in the embassy. And now I'm, you know, it can't dwell too much on that, because you just have to move forward. But it's, you know, that was a huge moment. And I agree, that was a moment that changed everything, you know. And even when he was in the embassy, there was still hope, like maybe Ecuador will have a new government, or they'll, you know, he'll be able to go there, or something will happen. And that was just, you know, that was the moment that really changed everything.
Yeah, because at least then there was still kind of a chance of just waiting for the government to turn over, waiting for something to happen, waiting for something, some sort of diplomatic protection. They had tried a couple of different times to get him out of the embassy, but the UK refused to recognize any diplomatic protection. We knew then, because you could see anybody who went to the embassy then, you could see the cameras and all the buildings around. And I remember one of the tenants in one of the buildings had received like a letter from the BBC, I think it was, to if they could put a camera off their balcony to watch the embassy. And so maybe it was CNN, I don't know. But so we knew how surveilled that building was. What we didn't know was the full extent of the surveillance inside, and how much of a violation to his not only human rights, but his lawyer client privilege. Everybody who was allowed to visit. There were, over the years, so many high profile people, activists, politicians, his friends, family, WikiLeaks employees. So many people have been in and out of that embassy. And, you know, looking back now, how many of those people were spied on? How many people had their conversations recorded? How many people had their cell phones essentially broken into and recorded as they were leaving identifying information at the desk to go see Julian? And so I would imagine for everybody who had visited him in the embassy, what is happening in Spain now with the UC Global case, it has to feel like a huge violation to so many people, not just Julian Assange.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, hallelujah that has come out. I really feel like that is a breath of fresh air, and you know, a little success that we've had here with that coming out. And it was great to hear from his Spanish attorney. You know, I thought that was good to hear too. I mean, I'm glad I hope that everything's been so unlawful in this case. I mean, every step of the way, but I'm hoping that this can come through, and that case can resolve, you know, even in time for it to have an effect on this February hearing. You know, I don't want that to get pushed through before we can have some resolution and see what's happened here, because it's so important.
Exactly. It was a big move that Julian was allowed to testify earlier last week, on Friday, I believe, for this case. And originally why his lawyers wanted an extension on the February hearing was to allow this to be fully come to a resolution, so the evidence could be used in the extradition hearing. I'm not sure what we're looking at as far as the timeline on the Spanish case, but I'm sure they will be doing everything they can to include that information in the extradition hearing.
And everybody, don't forget, the guys, Taylor and Steve and Andrew and Christy, are trying to go and cover the extradition hearing. So they have, they're trying to get funded for that. So anybody who can donate, We need independent media there to make sure we're getting proper coverage of these extradition hearings. So if you can like throw $1 their way so that they can, you know, go to London and DC to cover those hearings, it would be awesome.
Thank you, Misty.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are hoping to do that. Again, that is Steve and myself going to London to cover this because we have a journalism background, and then Christy and Andrew to stay here stateside in DC and set up a series of peaceful protests at locations of importance and symbolic locations, government buildings, and
Yeah.
places like that.
And we do have some exciting developments to share about just kind of as we're preparing for this and fundraising. We're going to do a show with Gordon Dimmick on his channel. I think Sunday, January 12th is our scheduled date. Hopefully
Hey,
we're
that's
out.
my birthday.
Happy
Aw.
early birthday.
I love Gordon. That's a great birthday present.
I know.
I
We're
would
really
leave my
excited.
wife for Gordon.
I will leave my
So
husband for
excited
Gordon.
to do this with Gordon. We're going to have sort of a mini telethon. We've got some UK guests planned. Then we're trying to get some things rounded up. So yeah, I'm sure we'll stream it on this channel too. But Gordon has been amazing, an amazing friend of the show, and we are so excited to do this show with him coming up in a couple weeks. And another amazing thing, Andrew and I will be heading to DC early on January 6th because we are going to do an interview with Lee Camp on Redacted VIP. So we are super excited that Lee has been helping us in the background and is going to be interviewing us on our coming actions and our fundraiser, and just being able to have this opportunity to talk about Julian and his why people should get behind and support him, and the urgency that we're looking at with his health as well.
Yeah,
So I want to.
despite independent media, will cover this, of course, but RT will also cover Julian Assange and does a great job of doing so. So it's very exciting that two of our own will be able to represent us, represent this vigil, and be able to talk about our efforts and the actions that will be taking place, peaceful actions to be taking place in Washington, DC. And then also Steve and I, of course, are going to be hooking up with Gordon Dimmick while we're there. We'll be working with him actively, I'm sure. We'll be doing live streams. We will be covering all of this for you guys. So it is well worth it. If you can donate to, please do so, because you will have access to information as quickly as possible, and we'll be very very transparent with all of the information that we are gathering. And we'll also be communicating, of course, with Christy and Andrew throughout this entire process, so that if you plan on going to DC, which we encourage you to do so if you can during that week, you know, you'll be able to hear it very quickly, also through Christy and Andrew.
Yeah, and we're planning to do some live interviews if we are able to during the actions. And so I'm sure we will do our normal Wednesday night, but I think you could be checking out our channel really all week, because we're all going to be streaming on and off that week.
So Kendra, I know that you do have to jump off of here soon. So I just want to thank you again for joining us. And if there's any last questions for my co-host for Kendra, please ask her now. And then Kendra, before you do jump off, I want you to just give your final thoughts, and then also let everybody know where they can find you on social media and how they can get involved with Denver Free Assange.
So one of the things, just real quick, because you touched on it, Kendra, it's never too late to start now moving forward with activism. It's never too late, like, oh, Julian's out of the embassy. It's too late now. He's already in prison. They already have him. So I think that's something that people don't talk about enough or highlight enough, is the fact that, like, it's never too late to start now. And I feel like that's the fact that that was something you brought forward. I really wanted to say thank you for that.
Yeah, not only that, but there's a tendency in activist circles, and I know that a lot of it is done by agents and people meant to disrupt. And if you're not already, please go and check out Susie Dawson's 1 versus 5 Eye series. and I saw Susie in the chat earlier. So hi, Susie. I hope you're still with us. At any rate, there's a tendency for people to shame activists for coming in, like, you know, in a relative amount of recent. And look, honestly, if you're here for the right reason, I don't care if it's your first day.
Yeah, of course. And if you, like Steve was saying, do also follow the 1 versus 5I campaign on Twitter at the number 1, the letters VS, the number 5, the letter I. We very much support that campaign. And again, if you're unfamiliar with it, it is all about holding the Five Eyes intelligence agencies accountable. And what the campaign really means, the 1 versus 5I, is all about journalist and activist Susie Dawson taking on the Five Eyes. She has reported on their abuses of power quite extensively, and so she is now holding them to account in a court of law. For more information on that specifically, please do go to 1versus5i.com. And if you do watch the teach-ins that were held, there's 10 episodes, which you can find on Susie's YouTube channel, which is Susie3D. It talks about in depth the tactics these intelligence agencies use to infiltrate activist groups, and then also sort of the different ways you can spot these sort of behaviors in others in particular. Having that knowledge really helps you feel more comfortable with those you're speaking with. But of course, you know, there's a healthy skepticism, of course, but it's always important to be educated on what signs to look for, because if you do have that knowledge and you are equipped with that ability to sense when things just don't seem right, you'll feel a lot more comfortable. And it's important to embrace, you know, new people, and because we do need more people joining this movement and this fight and this effort, because we were all at one time new. I mean, we're still very new to this in the grand scheme of things. None of us have been doing this for decades. So
I got my ass kicked by the cops for the first time at the WTO protests in 1994.
Okay, I'm sorry, Steve.
Steve's the exception.
Steve's the exception. Yes, Steve's the exception. But as far as like and again, I guess I can't really speak for everybody here, but as far as like the efforts to free Julian Assange, I don't think any of us were involved in this since 2000 or since 2010, when this all started to really get intense and the persecution was really increasing at that point. So all of us were at one time very new people. So that was the point I was trying to get across. So it's important to embrace others, and we need lots of people to be on the ground fighting for him and for this cause.
Susie is in the chat, and she just said something really poignant, that new activists mean a movement is growing. It's a sign of success. So yes, that's a good thing. We need more people. We want more people to take up the Free Assange movement and to join in actions and start their own actions too.
And something cool that I've talked with Kendra about and talked with Steve about offline is getting vigils set up like live on site, so that way it's not just you watching a screen, but you in a public place with other people sitting down watching the show and then discussing it as we chit chat about other things actually on the stream. So getting basically town halls built around the vigil was a goal of mine going into 2020.
Can I make a point real quick? I see in the chat there's a lot of talk about political affiliations, and to sort of reiterate what Susie's saying in the chat here, with these movements, we welcome everybody of various political opinions and political backgrounds, of course, within reason. Like, we are not happy to be working with people who hold hateful, dangerous ideas. That's not what we mean. But from people on the left side of the political spectrum and the right side of the political spectrum, we need everybody involved. So we don't attach any label to this movement at all. We welcome everybody, and we also don't endorse candidates or like support one candidate over the other. So we make sure to keep that very separate from this. It's important.
if you could, Kendra, because you have to go soon, I'll give you a little like platform. Talk about like your biggest wins of 2019, but also about just in general the political climate and how you're feeling right now about politics and stuff like that.
Oh gosh. I mean, honestly, for me, some of my biggest wins has just been, I'm glad that Susie's on the chat, because I have to say that the stuff that she's put out and, just being able to learn and kind of spot some different things from that have been so incredibly helpful. Just even there's a phrase, and I'll probably misquote it, but just how like, infiltrators attack activists, activists like concentrate on the situation at hand. Like even that was just so helpful. So I feel like some of our biggest wins of 2019 is, for me personally, has just been growing in understanding and effectiveness. You know what I mean? Having some ideas work, some ideas not work. I'm really happy that we have a good core group. Not everybody can always show up to every rally, but we have a good core group of people that are there, that are committed, that are doing what they can do, because you can do, a lot more with even, with 20 people than you can with just a few scattershot, even a rally with like 25 people that show up one time is awesome, but if those people aren't continuing on, then that's hard to work with. So that was a big win for 2019. Our group has a lot of different ideas going to be more effective as we go into 2020. We are looking for a place for you, Andrew. I'm going to find one in Denver, and, we're going to tweet it out, and even, hopefully we get a lot of people in. That I've seen radio shows happen at a few different coffee shops, so I'm actually waiting on some contacts back. So hopefully this happens sooner than later. But those are wins too. And so I don't know, the political situation here, I think part of the reason that I support WikiLeaks, part of the reason I'm so, want Julian Assange free, want Chelsea Manning free, is because there's a reason that they are going after them. And it's because they have hit at the heart of things. And that is our information source. That is this propaganda, this, this spell almost that people are put over. That is why people, I'm happy to welcome everybody into our group, because other than WikiLeaks and some independent platforms, nobody even knows what the hell is going on. So what are we really arguing about? And even in this year, I've learned so many things from other people who have been active. I've had views change. I think that's important, that as we learn things, that we're able to say, oh, I was wrong, or even like I appreciated that thing from the tweet from Miss Assange, like be polite, that's stuff that you have to remember, because it's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to behave the same way. And this is something different. And so I'm just hoping that as 2020 comes, to even grow these relationships, like with you guys, it's been great. Misty, I see you on Twitter all the time, so it's nice to see you in the chat. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward. We will have, yes, everybody donate for sure. It is so important to get Action for Assange out to DC and out to London. And I know already we have members in Denver that are excited to go to DC, and we'll also be having something in Denver as well. So,
Yes,
thanks
you
everybody
guys
a ton.
You and Jocelyn have been helping us plan, and Denver's been a great resource for us to help plan all of these upcoming things in DC. And we really appreciate your help, and we're excited to work together, and we're excited to see who can make it to DC, and yeah, what you guys will be planning in Denver as well.
So Kendra, can you let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter or on social media in general, and also how they can follow Denver Free Assange?
So the best way to follow us is at DNV Free JA on Twitter. And then also my email address is, or our email address for I run it, but for the Denver Action to Free Assange is Denver Action, 2, Free JA at protonmail.com. So, even if you're already an activist and you're doing your own stuff, I would love to get an email from you, because what I will do is I will add you to our list, and you can take some of the work that I've done, or if you're doing things that, please add me to it so that we can, spread this out. So if I have a huge thing out, you can copy paste or do whatever. I always encourage our members to share like the letters that they write to each other, because sometimes it's easier to just, take something and send it off. So yeah, that's where you can reach me. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Thank you again. All right, that was
Take
Kendra.
care. Bye. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas. All right, that was Kendra Christian with Denver Free Assange. I got to meet her this year when I was in Denver and work with her. It was really great. So if you are in the area, do take some initiative if you are able to, and work with them, because they're very nice people and a pleasure to work with. So I know we wanted to talk about, in addition to what is taking place in 2019, I don't believe we've gotten through the entire year, but we also wanted to talk about what we see happening in 2020 potentially, and then also what we see happening throughout the decade, this upcoming decade, which is weird to think that we are going to be in the 20s now, but that is where we're at. 2020. So of course, we know we have an election coming up. That's one thing. But specifically with Julian's case, we know that there is obviously a February full extradition hearing that we've been talking about. And that is set to last potentially 3 to 4 weeks, and they may not even be consecutive. So a lot of that is still up in the air, and we'll just be following it very closely as we learn more about what this full extradition hearing is really going to look like. But it is a good thing that there is additional time, because originally it was 5 days, which is not enough time for this at all. So It's a great thing that they did decide to expand the amount of time in court and give it the time that it deserves, the 3 to 4 weeks.
Well, and even I believe it's the October 21st hearing, they had talked about not even giving it the full 5 days at that time, when they did not want to move it back any. So yeah, so now we're looking at potentially 4 weeks, and 4 weeks that may not be consecutive. We are still planning, obviously, as we've been talking about, to be going to these locations the very first week of the trial, and depending on how it rolls out, maybe we can be traveling again for the very last week if we have enough heads up on when that will be. I don't expect this to be easy. I don't expect this to be easy to cover, and I don't expect them to, I don't know, I kind of, they like to be very dodgy with the vans when they bring him to Westminster Magistrates, so I can only imagine how they're going to be about letting the press know when these court dates will be happening, and there may not be a lot of time to be fundraising again and planning, but we are sure going to do as much as we possibly can. And yeah, we heard in the last couple weeks, there's been multiple case management hearings that the lawyers were complaining they had not been able to give Assange a summary of the case, that they had around 20 witnesses, and that he hadn't even been able to see key evidence yet. So there's a lot to happen in the next, I think we're 8 weeks, maybe under 8 weeks now. So how do you guys feel about how Assange is going to feel by the time this extradition hearing starts? Do you feel like he's going to be in a good space where he is able to focus and really be an active part in his own hearing? This will be taking part in place in Belmarsh, so this is a different setting too.
Well,
So I think
let's first of all hope that the petition to move it back to Westminster gets approved, and failing that, the petition to move it to Belmarsh's largest possible courtroom goes through. But look, man, even at full faculty, having not been tortured in prison for 8 months, 10 months going into trial, the lack of access to the materials that he needs to assist in preparing a defense, or have an informed conversation with his attorneys, not being able to see what the prosecution has against him. It's just no one is going to be uh, in any kind of position to, to the best of their ability, aid in the preparation and defense of themselves.
I think the Spanish case kind of gives me a lot of hope because he's getting to at least engage in that process. The British justice system is not a justice system; it's a joke. But at least the Spanish courts allow some room, like he's allowed to testify. I'm sure that there's more preparation time that he'll be given in a case like that. So being dragged into court for this case with the Spanish government and with this literal private security firm. I think it's a silver lining as much as it sucks because it lets him have a way to re-engage at least with a certain number of people again in a intellectual fashion.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I mean, obviously, I'm worried just based on the things that we've been hearing. And I mean, that we've been seeing. And the fact that he's not being given adequate time to prepare and to converse with his lawyers and have access to material. I mean, that's all really, really troubling, obviously. I'm hopeful that he's got a team around him that can help, push him through. And I mean, obviously maybe one of the strongest human beings ever. The stuff that he's had to endure over the past, several years is pretty intense. And that he's still hanging in there is pretty amazing. So I'm hopeful, but I'm also a little worried. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I agree with you, Andrew. I think that the Spanish case will really help him kind of re-engage intellectually and maybe reinvigorate him in a way. But I'm not gonna lie, I am worried. I am a little worried.
Yeah, and I should make it clear that like what I had to say is more in an indictment of the British court system and the way that Julian Assange has been treated for almost a decade now, and not in any way, a slight on Julian Assange. It's just fuck, man. If you're stuck in that position with the very limited resources that he has available to him, and that's 100% to make him suffer and to make him take away his ability and his agency to take part in his own defense. It puts you at a disadvantage. You're right. The British court system is a joke, but they're being dictated to by the U.S. State Department.
Right. And this, I mean, once we go through this hearing and this is over, there will be an appeals process too. So if this takes 3 months, well into the summer, I mean, who knows what we're looking at? There was a little back and forth about one of the key U.S. prosecutors not being available, and so maybe it would be partly in February and partly in April. So there is going to be an appeals process, no matter what what the outcome is in this first hearing, and that could take months on top of that. So we are looking at this lasting well through 2020, and we already have a man who has been through so much and is continuing to be tortured psychologically in this prison. And what kind of outlook does he have to keep fighting? And I mean, we know Julian's spirit is amazing, but it is hard to see the photos of him when he does come out in public and to see how much he's changed through 2019.
Yeah, they say this process can take quite some time. And I think it typically, well, maybe not typically, but in the past, it has taken several years. So this could be going on for several years. It's an exhausting process. But we did learn from this particular hearing that took place last week. Of course, we know that Julian was able to testify in the Spanish case, and hopefully that information will be allowed to be introduced in his full extradition hearing. But we also, and we've talked about this before, the nature of the US-UK extradition treaty, it prevents the extradition of any person who is being extradited for political purposes. Well, of course, we know that is precisely what is happening. I believe there was a provision made to this particular treaty in 2003, or they added on to it, or this was put into place in 2003. So his attorneys, I guess, are planning to kind of use this to their advantage and argue this in court, that his extradition is illegal based on this principle, that it is for political purposes. And we are, from this article that was published in the World Socialist website, we
I can pull that up too, by the way.
Yeah, it's all about the hearing in February. And yes, Steve is going to pull that up for us, but it seemed as if the judge was being slightly more fair, I guess, reading that article. So that's good news. And this was written by somebody who had contact with people who were in the courtroom, or at least were present outside the courtroom. So this is coming from the World Socialist website. And
yeah, so he was brought to Westminster Magistrates Court, and on the 19th he was video linked in to Westminster Magistrates. Then on the 20th, for the Spanish hearing, he was actually brought to Westminster Magistrates to video link to Spain. And there was a little bit of a mix-up, conveniently. That we haven't really got I think a very solid reason as to why he was so delayed in getting there on Friday. But he was not there at the time he was scheduled to be to testify in this case.
Right, I believe there was concern that it was either because of something he did, they said, that he was late, which I don't know how he could. He has no control over his own actions and behaviors, or it was
Right.
Belmarsh made him late. I know there were two potential theories there.
It's in my opinion, it's a way of manipulating a situation.
Oh,
totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like they know Julian's going to
dominance.
get to testify, so they're going to try to give him as little time, make it as rushed and as incomplete as possible to stress him out, to stress his lawyers out, and just cause this chain reaction of just more anxiety on top of everything else that's already happening.
And Belmarsh isn't just down the
think
street. Belmarsh is, I think at least a good hour outside of London with traffic, maybe more depending on the time of day. So this isn't just, carting him down the street. This is a journey of like needing to be on time and leaving in enough time to get through London traffic. And this is totally manipulation on the part of the UK government.
Yeah, I think it's to cause a hassle, but like once he gets there, like the attorneys have authority to question him as long as they want to during testimony. So like that wouldn't really be affected. This is, I think, more meant to impact him psychologically or cause him stress and just make the process a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, and we do know that they do this when he receives visitors in Belmarsh, but in that case, he doesn't get that a lot of time. It just ends up cutting his visits short with friends and family when they come to visit him.
In here, there was a statement made that I thought was interesting, where it said that the prosecutors were not pleased with the magistrate judge's decisions made here. I can't find that exact quote. Oh, okay. Lawyers for the prosecution showed signs that they were rattled by yesterday's hearing, having argued for months that Assange's legal team must bend to meet impossible deadlines. Claire Dobman for the US government told Judge Baratzer the prosecution needed more time because, quote, a vast amount of evidence has been served, end quote. And I guess she was not, willing to rule in their favor in this case. So it shows maybe some slight, something slightly positive happening here, that she's being a little bit more fair, but that is not at all to say that this is going to be a fair extradition hearing or trial. But
Well,
I'm
look,
glad that there is something to look to for some hope.
the key line in that sentence was the prosecution looked rattled, and they should be. There's nothing legitimate about what they're doing. The last thing they need is a, you know, ragtag group of scrappy individuals to start holding weekly vigils to raise awareness about this and hopefully increase the activism profile of other people that have been doing tremendous work this whole time. And we've got the doctor's letter is well up over 100 people now. There's a journalist letter with well over 100 people signed now. The Reporters Without Borders just came out with a statement saying that Assange needs to be released immediately. I'll pull that up here in a minute. You know, Niels Melzer has been just doing incredible work raising awareness about this, and we're, you know, 2 months to the day -1 from the start of this trial. However long it takes, with the prosecution needs to know that we know that there's nothing legitimate about what they're doing. They need to know it from every corner of the globe, and they need to start hearing it from people in power. And they need to start hearing it from more quote unquote celebrities, because people are freaking sheep. And if one of their pet celebrities starts talking about how we need to raise awareness, free Assange, get Assange out of prison, and here's why, that will raise the profile of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then it kind of encourages entertainment outlets to have to cover this too. So it provides it with more exposure. But you're right, Steve. It is unfortunate that it takes a lot of people, their favorite celebrity that they idolize, to talk about this and care about it, for people to then care about it. But I think the point is that we just want people to care, and we just want people to get involved. So when celebrities do speak out, which I think they're kind of obligated to do so, they have they have a huge platform, and they could use it for good. And they absolutely can actually have some real impact in this case, I think, if enough of them speak out about this. Daily Mail, not that they do a great job, but by any means, but they have, they were pushed to cover this when MIA was, gave that performance outside of the UK Home Office. And other entertainment outlets, I believe, too, did cover this. So it's important that, celebrities do as well, and independent media.
And isn't it interesting that, Pamela Anderson has been at the forefront of trying to advocate for Julian Assange, and what the media does to her, and we've talked about this extensively on our show this year, but what the media does to her as a celebrity who is advocating for Julian Assange, not really giving her that platform that she would maybe have in her other advocacy that she does, and activism work. But really the media just sort of uses it as a opportunity to tear her down and belittle her, and kind of just chalk her up as some sort of gal pal of Julian Assange who doesn't know
And
what she's speaking on.
and it's something like with Pamela Anderson, it's twofold to me, because her going on that show and getting like verbally molested by these people and just accosted for standing up for the right thing creates headlines and creates a space for the independent media to talk about it. But at the same time, it shouldn't take that woman putting herself in that situation to create a headline for you to talk about Julian Assange's situation as an independent content creator from the left or the right.
But
So
she
that's
fucking
one.
crushed that show. She
Tap into
crushed that
that.
show. She was amazing on that show. She nailed every one of them.
But the crap end of that is that she leaves after her segment, and John McCain's daughter gets to say whatever John McCain's daughter wants to say.
Oh my God. She walked off the stage. She got so mad about this.
Oh, big mad, big mad by like the kind of spoiled entitlement that only the progeny of a war criminal can emit.
Yeah, I mean, she is just, I mean, I don't, like her politics by any means, but I mean, her viewpoints on Assange and WikiLeaks, it's really upsetting to see somebody with that standing in media get away with talking about such
He's a set of curlers away from being Paula Dean.
yeah, she just like says stuff that's absolutely false. It's inflammatory. It's crazy. Andrew, conservative girl comment. Is that the tweet we're talking about? It was weird. I know, super weird.
John McCain's sperms really they don't
really?
do well. Like it's just.
Oh God! Seriously, we have to go there.
That's gross.
I like Steve's just John McCain's daughter a little better. Doesn't give me the silly.
That is the seed of a war criminal right there.
Yeah.
No, I do like how you call her John McCain's daughter, and it is really funny because there's actually like a montage of her
my father.
My father. It is
right.
Really, yeah, it's so funny.
Well, why else does she have a job? She only has a job or a profile or spotlight because she's John McCain's daughter. If some random schmuck was running around saying the kind of garbage that she gets paid for, they'd be categorically ignored. But because she's John McCain's daughter, she gets a freaking profile. The people that are chosen to be elevated, because it is a process and you don't get that seat unless you play a lot of ball or you just happen to be a war criminal's daughter. They're there to spread disinformation. They're there to disseminate propaganda. They're there to control the narrative. And man,
you know what?
I was put on Pam Anderson for going in there and telling them what was up, but their audience wasn't there to listen to Pam Anderson. Their audience was there to listen to fucking Joy Behar and John McCain's daughter agree.
Also too, I mean, they like tried to create a gossipy element to that interview. They were really hyper focused on, their relationship and we had an entire video about this, when in reality, it's nobody's business, the nature of their relationship, but they tried to like play on that and discredit her by really focusing on that. But you know what? There are
they turned it into a very gossipy segment instead of a very serious issue that really had the opportunity the family had the opportunity to bring to this audience that probably has no idea how important
I would actually really like to release. I was going to say, I would really like to release trash talking videos about John McCain's daughter on a regular basis and just like consistently tag her in Twitter, because I don't know if she's gotten enough of that. Like, just take every one of these clips of us shit talking her and release it, tag her on it.
There are times,
if you will.
Right.
There are times where I will just watch like a video clip of The View just to see what they're going to say, like about impeachment or something. It just for entertainment. It is literally the most off the wall stuff. And I wonder to myself, like, I feel like we're not living in the same world. I'm not kidding. I know that's an overexhausted idea that people say all the time, but quite literally, I hear what they're saying and I'm like, I cannot believe that people are still buying into this, and that they're still accepting this, and that they still feel comfortable talking about Russia and saying that Joe Biden would be a great president and that he is the guy to lead the country when he says crazy, insane statements that are incoherent.
It does feel very much like they live on a different planet than we do, or a different reality that I feel like the mainstream news and talk shows, it's just a whole world of whitewashed and
it's a multi-trillion-dollar fabricated version of reality. That's
propaganda is real. It is
Yeah.
real. Like it is strong. It is real. They know what they're doing and they do it well. And they have a vast majority of the country convinced that that's the reality they live in.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, a lot of them believe what they're saying.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I mean, on some level, they've
I
got to
think they
know
do
that
too.
they're just hollow husks of human. I didn't mean for that to be alliterative, but there you go. Um, but I think, yeah, no, they exist in a bubble. That bubble reinforces everything that they all of their preconceived notions. When somebody challenges it, it's like when you challenge a true believer of a dogmatic faith. They double down on their belief and they lash
See,
out at you.
yes, that is such a great point. That is such a great point. Like but I do agree with you. I do think they believe it. Like some people will say, oh, they don't buy into it. They're just pushing uh these talking points because they're told to, which yeah, I think they're told to, of course they are. They have producers that tell them what to say. But I do think that they oftentimes genuinely believe this stuff. I do.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't be where they are if those convictions and that if they weren't constantly reinforcing and being reinforced by repeating it. It's again, it's almost akin to religion in that aspect, in that everything about their words and actions reinforces that belief system. If your belief system is Russiagate is real, or if your belief system is QAnon is real, you're going to make sure that it's reinforced throughout your day.
And you
You
also
know?
don't, right. And you also don't get spots like that on television if you are somebody that challenges authority or challenges the status quo or is willing to speak up with adversarial viewpoints that are not accepted. You don't get those spots. So, yeah.
So something I want to bring up, we're kind of trending on this. I wanted to talk about like the biggest smears of 2019 for Julian Assange. In particular, the Russiagate, and we have some news on the Guardian and what they were reporting on the Paul Manafort story. But then also maybe some of you guys want to chime in about what you thought about the Swedish case being reopened, nothing coming about it, and then completely dismissed again this year, and what that really did to attempt to continue the smear campaign and damage Julian Assange's, I want to say character, but not really his character, but just continue the lie that he is a rapist, and what that maybe how that was introduced this year to perpetuate that again.
Well, I thought for sure that once they reopened the Swedish case, the investigation happened very soon after the arrest took place on April 11th. I mean, of course, I immediately thought this is because of US pressure. I mean, they're really not reopening this investigation because they have a reason to. I can't even remember what their excuse was for doing so. But again, that one really seems to stick. And if it's not the he's a rapist smear that sticks, or the rape charge that sticks when there was never a rape charge, that's something that they always say, people will automatically tie him to Sweden as well. If I have conversations with people sometimes that don't know a whole lot about this but know who he is, they'll often bring up like Sweden, like, oh, he was in Sweden or something. It sticks with people.
And I think it was the hearing on the 19th, the judge asked if he was a Swedish
Right.
citizen. Like what I mean, come on.
That was bizarre.
It's very bizarre.
I remember reading that in I think it was the World Socialist website article, I believe. Yeah, where she asked if he was like a Swedish national.
And they were verifying his name, birth date, and asking his country of origin. They asked about Sweden.
And he was talking at this point, like he was already saying his name, so you could hear like his accent too, which she should already know that he's Australian because she's the judge presiding over the case.
Yeah, and she's presided over a case before, and nobody in that court should have assumed he was a Swedish citizen like that.
Right.
You know.
So Steve, you have the Guardian article ready, and this is the one that they were yes. So the Guardian had to They didn't retract anything. I believe you could still access the original article, but they did
No,
clarify
they
some of their
reported
terminology they used.
Yeah, the article's still up. The whole article was just a ridiculous, I don't know. It wasn't even a hit job, because most hits are like clean and well done and professional. This was incredibly sloppy and based on all kinds of unsubstantiated sources and whatnot. But yeah, they reported on a plan to transfer Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian Embassy in London to Ecuador's embassy in Moscow by making Assange a member of the Ecuadorian embassy staff, first in London and then in Russia. And oh, there it is. Our report should have avoided the words smuggle and plot, since they implied that a diplomatic immunity in itself was illicit. The Guardian's review panel is issued really, and I went and I looked at that, and it was very long and mostly the Guardian like kissing its own ass. But while we're here, there was, where did it go?
But to me, it doesn't even seem like they're really correcting the fact that this is a completely
Right.
false story. They're just saying, oh, we should have not used these specific words. They never like straight up said in
Maybe we
explicit
should have
shit.
used
this
better
was false.
words. Yeah. The
And they
Guardian,
should get rid of this article too, and they
Yeah.
didn't.
the
or-
Guardian has been a large contributor to the smear campaign on Julian Assange over the last decade, and they are
Oh, without a
refusing
doubt.
to accept their part in it. And now after he's been arrested and everything this year, they have put out a couple stories of like, well, I don't think he should be extradited, because they maybe are
those
starting
are-
to see the writing on the wall. But not only are we talking about they've contributed in the print of their own articles to the smear campaign, but you watch any documentary about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks where a Guardian reporter is being interviewed, and they always have to take a dig at him. They always have to change the narrative. So this has been a campaign that they have been a part of probably since they were even media partners in 2010, when we heard about how they didn't care about redactions and Assange did.
Right. Yeah, they've always, with this case, they have very much contributed to spreading smears and falsehoods. The Paul Manafort story, they still haven't made any comment that was not true. They haven't, I don't think they've commented on it, and they
Still
haven't.
has a freaking job.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
he'll
you're right.
always have a
Right.
job. He
Yeah.
will
Did they comment
always
on that
have a
article?
job.
Did they ever say anything?
No,
Like,
they've
I
never
don't
said
know.
any.
Remember
No.
when milkshaking was a thing for like 3 weeks in the
Oh, yeah.
and they were throwing milkshakes
Yeah.
at politicians?
Yes.
Luke Harding
Luke
needs a
Harding.
milkshake thrown at him like 10 times a day.
I will say, if you
Can you
ever
guys
want to have-
organize that when you go to London? Can you?
Yeah,
get some
well, if
milkshakes?
you ever
Milkshake
want
Luke
to be
Harding.
like thoroughly entertained,
amazing.
go watch the
We're
Aaron
gonna have
Mackay
to set up
interview.
a separate GoFundMe for whatever charges might be filed against me and whatever I have to go through for that. But yeah, I now that I've said it on camera, of course I'm joking, Kevin. I'm
Kevin,
joking.
It's a joke, Kevin.
That's
What
a
interview
joke.
were you talking
Kevin.
about, Misty?
I'm the
I was just
funny
saying, if
guy
you ever
here.
want to be thoroughly entertained, go watch the Aaron Mackay interview of Luke Harding. It is fabulous.
Ooh,
It is
I haven't seen
fabulous.
this.
You've never
Yeah.
seen it?
He
No.
was still
Oh,
think so.
it's so good. It's so good. Aaron Mackay interviewed Luke Harding about his book on Russian interference.
Oh yeah.
It's called
Ooh.
Collusion, but there's no evidence of collusion in his book.
Can we
and
pull
it
that
is
up?
A great interview.
no, not without getting dinged.
It's long.
Alright.
It's long. It's
Okay.
long. It's like 20, maybe
Okay.
20, 30 minutes long. But
really is.
I will tell you, the ending is, I won't spoil it for you because it's worth watching, but the ending is fantastic. It's fantastic. Seriously, go
Okay.
watch it. Everybody go watch it, right? Like, as soon as this
And
stream's
really,
over.
And
go
not
watch
right
it.
now.
It's like,
Not right
No,
now.
no, don't go right now.
it's like 27 minutes of Aaron asking Luke
Beating his
Harding,
ass.
what is the proof of
Yeah.
that?
His
can
whole
we-
the title of his book is Collusion, but there's no evidence for collusion in his book. It's amazing.
And we
the
know that
entire thing is conjecture and innuendo
Mhm.
and Steele dossier and oh no, I mean it's a Luke Harding special, and you're right, Misty. He will always have a job, but
Will.
that job should come with frequent milkshaking. That's all.
Just kidding, Kevin.
Kidding, Kevin.
yeah.
Maybe
Yeah, so
I-
we are joke just because we have to be somewhat sensitive to this stuff. We're of course joking and just making fun here.
Don't milkshake anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, we're
No.
making fun here.
We do not condone violent actions in Julian Assange's name. We ask
Right.
that you always do peaceful actions. No violence,
Yeah.
even milkshakes.
And that's not from a stance of like, we can't say don't be violent.
No. don't be
That's from like a literal like principled like we are better than them. We do not need to behave in that way stance. So I think
Also,
that's
milkshakes are delicious. Don't waste them on Luke Harding.
Drink the
It's
milkshake.
true.
Drink
It
them.
is. However, there's no guarantee that a McDonald's milkshake is actually a real milkshake. So
That's
you're
yeah,
Fair enough.
kind of moral.
Yeah, that's a good
Fair
point.
enough.
it's not real. Always demand real ice cream in your milkshake.
So
Learned
And
one
spun
thing from
malt.
the lesson tonight.
So can I actually pull up one of my like favorite articles here from 2019?
Sure.
yes.
Completely unrelated to Julian, and I'll send Steve the link if he could pull it up. It's actually from Zero Hedge, which isn't generally the best, but for this one, it's really hard to find another source for it. It's from.
I think I think this is where I initially went because this was my video that day. My live stream that day was about this particular thing. So hang on just a moment. Stop. You stop. Not you.
So as he's pulling it up, just to kind of preface it, this came out September 6, 2019. It's a story about the University of Alaska Fairbanks actually releasing a report after releasing a draft report after a 4-year study about World Trade Center 7. And they basically said like, no, there wasn't structural
Come
fires.
back
It
to
was
my computer.
like a
I'll
deliberate
come back to
structural.
it with my computer.
What?
No, I'll just have my computer's freezing. I'll have to come
Okay.
back to that. But
But-
continue setting it up.
Yeah, so I'll just start reading it a little bit. According to the press release, the release of the draft report began a 2-month period during which the public was invited to submit comment. The final report will be published later this year. According to the study's authors, the AUF research team utilized 3 approaches for examining the structural response of World Trade Center 7 to the conditions that may have occurred on September 11, 2001. First, we simulated the local structural response to the fire loading that may have occurred below floor 13, where most of the fires in World Trade Center 7 are reported to have occurred. Second, we supplemented our simulations by examining the collapse initiation hypothesis developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Third, we simulated a number of scenarios within the overall structural system in order to determine what types of local failures and their locations may have caused the total collapse of the total collapses observed. Then I'm just going to skip down to the next quote here. Fire did
Yep.
not cause the collapse of World Trade Center
I'll
7.
highlight it.
Fire did not cause the collapse of World Trade Center 7 on 9/11. To the contrary, to the conclusion of NIST and private engineering firms that studied the collapse. The secondary conclusion of our study is that the collapse of World Trade Center 7 was a global failure involving near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. And long story short, it basically says that 9/11 was an inside job. And if you're willing to look at the news that no one is talking about, that is literally the thing that we've all known since September 12th, or in some people's case, middle of whatever
September
month,
11th.
whatever year, just whenever you were exposed to the fact that this was bullshit. But this is documented, recorded, scientific bullshit. So I think that's an important thing to call out this year, is like, we can break propaganda. We can change people's minds and change the world. So
And there's a great presentation on that too. The architects and engineers for truth gave. Yeah, I have a video on it. I know Burmis has a video on it too. If you're at all interested, please go check that out.
I think about like how long it took to get things like this out in the public, and how many years we've been at war because of 9/11. And as we saw with this year with the Washington Post releasing the Afghan papers, and sort of this media cheering on that. But in 2010, we had Chelsea Manning's leaks to WikiLeaks, and now she and Julian Assange are in prison. So how do we reconcile these two things? How do we keep Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange in prison, but we applaud the Afghan papers? You know, why is nobody asking that question on mainstream media?
Yeah, I asked that question.
I know you did, but
but I'll continue to ask that, because all it does is vindicate
yes.
the war diaries. That's all it does. All it does is highlight the waste and fraud that's already been documented in WikiLeaks years and years and years ago. And yeah, the fact that no one is making the connection is 100%, 100% on purpose.
And it's not that they're not making the connection. It's that this is a way to distract people from viewing that. So when people search Afghan war logs, this is what's going to come up in Google instead of a WikiLeaks result or an article based on a WikiLeaks result. So it's a very like specific, I almost want to call it propaganda effort that they've been forced into to counteract the war narratives and things like that, to create the facade for search engines to put in front for the things that they want people to know, which is that the war is bullshit at this point.
Right, and these papers were released on the Freedom of Information Act, correct? So this took a court proceedings of about 3 years, and so this was
3 years of lawsuits.
right, and so this is controlled by the government on what is released, and just these little tidbits. And we've talked with Ray McGovern multiple times now about things like releasing the JFK documents and how it's very controlled and what we are allowed to know, and these little pieces every 20 years or so come out. And so yeah, we as a society are overlooking the contribution to this conversation that Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning have had, and WikiLeaks has continued to give contributions of real 100% accurate information on so many topics, not just the Afghan war logs, not just the Iraq war logs, or the collateral murder video. I mean, we're talking about various environmental issues. The fish rot was the newest one that just came out. We're talking about the gassing, whether it happened or not, in Syria. We're talking about corporations and corruption. So I think society has a short-term memory, and we're forgetting all the contributions that WikiLeaks has had. It's not just the DNC emails, and it's not just Chelsea Manning's leaks. Those, yes, are very important and very big stories. But I think, like Kendra was saying, if you can send people information and you can get to talk to them about what WikiLeaks does and has done, I think it just blows people's minds, really.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like we live in, like we were talking about earlier, almost an entirely separate world. And all you have to do is remind people like, hey, these other things exist. Like, hey, do you remember this guy that you cheered for 10 years ago? Like,
yes,
he still needs your help. Like the fight's not over. The war's still going on.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the same people that initially were applauding him for his work were the same Democrats and liberals that today are accusing him of potentially working with the, Russians to influence the outcome of our election.
Right.
They firmly believe that, even though we know that that is not at all the case, that is not at all what happened, it's not true. These are the same people, so it definitely, it also shows that the people who support, like, oftentimes, it's important to be aware that when certain like political groups end up really supporting WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, it's usually because they benefited from a particular leak at that time. We saw with Trump when he was back in 2016, when he was still running for office, or was running for office at that time, praising WikiLeaks, of course, because it was convenient for him politically. Now, of course, he's kind of abandoned this praise of WikiLeaks, as we've seen. But
And that's something that Susie actually talked about too, that really shaped part of my political view and how I approach this situation. Any politician can use Julian Assange's name to rise to power because all they have to do is say words, because no one else in the room is going to support any action that they take. And so that's why I think it's really important that when someone says that they support Julian Assange, you ask them how and in what way and through what action. Because words from powerful people, while it may make a headline at one point in time, doesn't change the situation. So that's why I think it's so important. Like, there's candidates that come to mind, I'm sure, as I say this, but make them meet us in the trenches fighting for this. Don't allow them to stand in the ivory tower of whatever political establishment they're in and say, hey, that's bad.
So, Steve, I know you have a Gray Zone article that talks about Julian Assange helping Russia, what we were just talking about. You want to pull that up on the screen?
That was a brutal cut. Yeah, this was back in August of this year, so we're still in the 2019 timeline. But and this was written by Fidel Navarez, who was one of Julian Assange's attorneys. But what you were just talking about, Taylor, was directly related to a July 15th CNN publication of security reports reveal how Assange turned an embassy into a command post for election meddling. And this is where people really got the idea that that Julian Assange, collaborated with Vladimir Putin to rig the election for Donnie Johns there.
Oh, and just a quick, Fidel Navarez was an Ecuadorian diplomat there, so he was actually there at the time Julian Assange was in the embassy for a number of years. So when this article says, I think it even says in quotations like, I was there, he literally was there for years as a diplomat.
And I'm not going to go through all 40 of these, but it's a lot of the same song and dance, because again, there was nothing to substantiate what they were talking about. But
I thought we talked about, when was this published? Because I thought we talked about this.
August.
I think we did.
We did. I remember it was one of our first vigils. We talked about this.
And that number one, that first thing literally debunks the entire theory of Russiagate. Like that one.
Yeah.
Like Russiagate, in their own words, in there, is literally debunked, because they said the Russians hacked the election and sent it to Julian. Like, that's like the core foundation of the entire fucking scheme that they developed around this.
Yep.
And that's the part that gets left out. As Russiagate came crumbling down, the conversation about Julian Assange was ignored.
This is a great one right here. The stunning detail, and this is in the CNN report. The stunning details come from hundreds of surveillance reports compiled by the Ecuadorian government by UC Global, private Spanish security company obtained by CNN. And I love the way that this is framed here. The stunning thing is that CNN considers the reports produced by UC Global as a reliable source. I know personally that many of its reports do not reflect reality. And this is obviously written before, it came to light that UC Global was
Yeah.
direct feed to the CIA.
Oof. That's fun to reread. Go back.
Okay, Steve, are you still sharing your screen?
No, I'm not. I'll go back to it for a second though. I thought there was
Okay, I don't know.
The chat light up and an Ecuadorian intelligence official told CNN that the surveillance reports are authentic. Fantastic point right here. I can't help but wonder if this is the same anonymous Ecuadorian intelligence official who caused The Guardian to publish demonstrably false reports on Julian Assange, such as the hoax that Manafort held secret conversations with Assange. That was our good buddy Luke Milkshake Harding. In the Ecuadorian Embassy, or Russia's secret plan to help Julian Assange escape from the UK. But look, you publish it in CNN, and that reaches an audience of several million people, and it corroborates what they heard Rachel Maddow say, or it corroborates what they heard John McCain's daughter say, and they run with that, with this, just ill-conceived and fact-free construction, and they call it reality. That's where activism comes in, though. That's where we try to, set the record straight as best as possible. We lost Taylor.
I'm sure she'll be back.
Dogs?
I don't know.
Oh, I wanted to pull up that
Welcome back.
Reporters Without Borders.
I couldn't escape the full screen mode. Everything I was trying, it would not work. So I just decided to X out of it. That's all.
Okay.
Did you try turning it off and back on?
I wanted to go to the Reporters Without Borders
Yes. This
statement.
just came out today, is that correct?
Yesterday. Came out yesterday. And Reporters Without Borders is alarmed by reports that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's health has deteriorated in detention and calls for his immediate release on humanitarian grounds. RSF condemns the continued targeting of Assange for his journalistic activities, which sets a dangerous precedent. The statement goes on quite a bit. If anybody wants to jump in and read a little bit, I've been doing most of that.
I could read it. All right, starting with Assange. Okay, this is coming from Reporters Without Borders, finally, issuing a statement here, and it says, Assange's extradition hearing is due to begin at the Westminster Magistrates Court in London on the 24th of February. RSF is concerned by reports that Assange has had insufficient opportunity to prepare for this hearing and that his lawyers do not have adequate access to him in prison. Both of these measures violate his fundamental rights. RSF representatives plan to monitor the extradition hearing. So this is good. And it goes on to say that RSF is deeply concerned by the statement issued by UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, on the 1st of November, in which he, quote, expressed alarm at the continued deterioration of Julian Assange's health since his arrest and detention earlier this year, saying his life is now at risk, end quote. A group of more than 60 doctors also issued a similar warning in an open letter dated the 25th of November, expressing concern that Assange's health was so bad he could die in prison without urgent medical care. Assange appeared in a Madrid court via video link from the UK on the 20th of December as part of an investigation into his allegations that a Spanish firm spied on him while he lived inside the Ecuadorian Embassy in London. RSF has previously condemned the US government's targeting of Assange for his journalistic activities, as classified documents leaked by WikiLeaks led to journalistic revelations that were in the public interest. Assange should not be prosecuted for being an intermediary between a whistleblower and media sources. Very good point there. In the US, Assange faces a total of 18 charges, 17 of them under the Espionage Act, which has been increasingly used by the Trump administration to target reporting and whistleblowing on matters related to national security. And it goes on to say here, should I keep going? Quote, "We are alarmed by the current state of Julian Assange's health and call for his immediate release on humanitarian grounds," said RS. Okay, no, it's okay. I read quite a bit. I don't want to.
You did a great job.
Too much. But again, it just kind of plays out what we already know. But it's good again to have these journalistic organizations stepping up and issuing statements like this. This is something that I tried to make happen here with like local press clubs and press organizations, and it did not go well. Basically, they did acknowledge me. They did respond to my emails. They said they would talk to the board of executives, which is like these corporations, of course. I don't know if they ever really talked to them, but their response to me was that they did not want to issue a statement in support of Julian Assange because his case doesn't impact local reporters and journalists, and that's what they're focused on, which doesn't make any sense because we know, of course, that it absolutely does impact local reporters and journalists. So that argument was factually incorrect and completely a ridiculous statement to make. And I think it was, of course, just a response that was calculated and on purpose. And they didn't expect me to push back. I tried to like continue to get in contact with them, and then they just stopped responding to me.
That may actually be something that we should try to start up doing again, because I think there's like 11 or 12, something like that.
Maybe citing these Reporters Without Borders as like, hey, look, this organization did it.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. That may help and say, hey, look what they said. You all need to step up and do the same thing here.
And now we have the Journalists for Assange, the Speak for Assange petition open letter that can be cited as well. I think, I'll double check, but I think they're closing on probably 1,000 signatures.
Well, that's one thing I've noticed that's happened as when we were talking about like 2019 and how it's kind of ending is, it started off pretty rough, and, in April he was, taken out of the embassy and everything. But I've noticed since then, it's been kind of this slow buildup of support coming from a lot of places that I wasn't ever sure was going to speak up and support him. And so that's kind of giving me a little bit of hope, is that now we're seeing, all of these doctors and these journalists and, the Reporters Without Borders. Now we have these people that are speaking out, and that's only going to continue to build, because now that these people are speaking out, it's going to make it so much easier for other people to join in. And it's not going to be, there's not going to be a stigma surrounding supporting Assange, because there are so many people now speaking out I can only hope and think that that's going to continue to build as we go into 2020. I'm hoping.
Yeah, so there's over 1,000 signatures on the Speak Up for Assange. And this isn't the only open letter. There's the Doctors for Assange, there's Lawyers for Assange. Taylor and I were honored to be asked to sign an open letter to Scott Morrison, the PM in Australia. And that is now taking public, it's open to the public for others to sign as well.
Something I think we could start too, now that we're naming off all the different groups, is probably Teachers for Assange. Because like I know, at least personally, a lot of people involved in the Chicago teacher strike. So that might be some way to get a petition rolling through there. So that might be something cool to get educators and like elementary, junior high, and high school level people, like outside of what's considered the academia sphere, actually teaching students about Julian Assange.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me tell you, they won't do it. Academia won't do it.
Fuck colleges,
I'm surprised
fuck
that
academia.
I know what you mean. I'm actually surprised that teachers are willing to sign this, because like I feel like teachers often have to like have a certain depict themselves in a certain way or portray themselves in a certain way that's I guess I don't know, they just have to, because of course they are working with parents, children, and there's oftentimes like they have to be pretty
My
neutral on
my
things.
high
So wait,
school
real quick,
American,
back
I was
in
gonna say
April, there's MEB has a World Socialist website article citing teachers demand freedom for Assange and Manning. So
Is that just, was that just in the UK, the teachers in the
I'm
UK?
trying to find out.
Okay.
Teachers who've been in the forefront of wave of global strikes are speaking out forcefully against the attempts of the Trump administration and Democratic Party to silence the courageous voices of Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning. I'm trying to find out here. You can talk amongst yourselves.
we're just gonna sit quietly and wait.
Well, a big thank you to everybody who has donated to us. I think we got some donations just
gotten-
recently too.
Yeah,
If you
we've
want to
gotten
name those
two
people.
tonight. One of them was anonymous, and one of them was Sophia, who was in our chat. Thank you so much, Sophia. She's been on she was on our Chelsea Manning show on a Sunday.
Sophia's awesome.
So yeah, we are really close. We're about $100 away from our first milestone. And if we could get to that tonight, that'd be awesome, because that would fully fund one of us. We were kind of estimating how much each of us would need for travel, lodging, potentially paying for a few meals, and anything we would need to help with the actions, or like Taylor and Steve might need to rent equipment once they're over in the UK to stream with us. So yeah, if you could donate, we're getting really close to that first milestone. It would be amazing to do before we hit the new year. And if you can't donate, we also understand that, but please share the link on your Twitter or your social media account too.
Yeah, thank you so much to everybody who has donated to us. It's very helpful. So we're
And
upon examination of that article real quick, it was people who are on a steering committee for the World Socialist website, and they are teachers from all over the globe.
Gotcha. Cool.
Very cool. Yeah, it's cool how they have the different professions that are signing off on this. They need to get like a nurses for Assange too.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah, that
teachers
would be
for
great.
Assange should happen, but there's my mom was a public school teacher for a number of years, and then a college professor for a number of years as well. And and my aunt and my uncle and my other uncle, all in the education profession. And there is an institutional mentality that you have to follow that is very, very in line with, the mainstream status quo propaganda, and you are ostracized if you don't, and you better have tenure if you have an opinion that runs outside of the fold. That's why Chomsky gets to say whatever he wants. Chomsky's got institutional security. Most teachers don't have that. They can,
but with
they can
Chomsky,
be
like as much as I love him, even in his defense, he supported Hillary Clinton. Like when he was asked about it,
absolutely.
lesser of two evils,
Chomsky's
he was
made.
like,
I'm
"Yeah,
not
no,
trying
vote
to
for
say that
Hillary."
like he walks on water or anything. He's made bad calls. He's made bad statements. He's like, but out of all of the statements that he made and all of the choices that he made, the good far outweigh the bad in terms
Absolutely.
of his advocacy. I feel like I should write manufacturing confusion, because we already have manufactured consent, and I feel like someone needs to revisit that. And since it's my theory, I should do it.
Do it. Do it. Steve. You are very intelligent. You are. Every episode you do too. I know we have a lot of viewers tonight, so if you guys are not subscribed to this channel, please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell, double check that you are subscribed. Also subscribe to Steve's channel. He has his own show, and it's Slow News Day Show on YouTube. It's awesome. He does talk about Julian Assange, but he talks about, you know, other issues as well, other political issues. He has some really awesome guests on. He just had Elizabeth Voss on Sunday, and of course he goes live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So do check him out. And you do not cover the political horse race or impeachment, but covers issues that so many people are not talking about, and also providing a unique perspective. There you go, Steve.
Thank you for the plug. I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
do. No, I highly recommend my show.
I highly recommend your show too. I highly recommend it too. You have amazing guests on, and my favorite thing is, well, Taylor's right. You are really smart and you have an interesting perspective, but also best nicknames ever. You come up with the best nicknames for people ever. It's amazing. My favorite is Cable News on the Internet guy. That's the best.
I know. So funny. So funny.
Yeah,
Cable
Steve
News on
will,
the Internet
Steve will
guy.
crack you up, entertain you, and inform you. So yes, you should
If
definitely.
you're not hip,
subscribe.
Cable News on the Internet guy is Cenk Uger.
Yeah. Best name ever.
Yeah. And even if he becomes an elected member of Congress, he will always be Cable News on the Internet guy to me. It's too long to put on a bumper sticker, but.
Okay, so we just got $100 donation. Thank you, Flick Off. That's the name that it was donated under. So we are $7 away from our first milestone of $1,200. So if anyone's got $7 they want to donate to us to hit it for Christmas night, we would love it to have one of us fully funded to go to London and DC. And like we said, we will be doing more special events through January to help fundraise as well.
Right.
Oh, exactly. And all of my super chats from December out are going to go to the GoFundMe too. So
thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. You don't have to do that, so thank you.
And
we
just
also
so everybody knows,
have super chats now.
Yeah, I don't know if we have super chats. I didn't touch any buttons for it.
So, we'll talk about it another time, but we have to go through a process. But when we do that, I think it'd be really cool to have like a live stream where we just like answer questions. You know, because a lot of times people have questions for us in these chats that we don't have time to get to, or they're questions that are like very unrelated to what we're talking about at the time. Of course, we want to keep it focused on Assange and WikiLeaks revelations and that sort of thing. But it may be a cool opportunity to also raise money for our travels, protesting, and our travels to be covering this full extradition hearing. But again, we'll figure that out more as we discuss that between us. Did we have other news that we wanted to get to? Solitary Reaper, hi. I just saw that you said hi, guys. So hello.
Do you want to talk about Christine Assange's interview about Christmas? That would be a good one to cover next.
I'll go pull that. Give me a moment. It's gonna take a second.
Okay. So just I just wanted to point out how many of you are watching tonight. Please like, share the stream, subscribe, make sure you're subscribed. Sometimes we lose subscribers. But that's really cool that you all joined us on Christmas night, where we were really excited to do this show and have Misty and Kendra on. So yeah, we will keep going here with Christine Assange did a new interview recently and even shared some never before seen photos of Julian as a child and Julian as a young man with his son. And
I'm
Do we
sorry,
wanna
I had to
pull it up?
close out like 40 different open tabs. It was getting
Christy,
hectic.
in the chat, Beth just said she donated $7, so you should be,
okay.
yeah.
Oh,
Should be
thank you,
there.
Beth.
Thank you,
Thank
Beth.
you.
Oh,
Oh, was it behind a paywall?
Dude.
yeah.
Oh, you know what? I noticed that when I tried to read it, I had to go on my phone and
Yeah.
read the article. Oh, I can't stand that. Who
Yeah.
wants to kind of recap what it said? Christy, maybe you, because I know
Um,
you really capture the emotion of this quite well.
Yeah. I mean, really, Christine talked about how Christmas isn't something she even acknowledges right now, and that it hasn't been in years, and it really hasn't felt like Christmas for a very long time because of the situation that Julian is in and has been in for the basically this entire decade. And she really talks about um, the pain as a mother to have these countries going after her son, and then also the pain of watching. I mean, she's in Australia, so she is very far away from him, and I'm sure, and as she kind of hinted at, that seeing photos of him in the media and watching him slowly continue to his physical condition getting worse and worse is very, very painful for her. So yeah, it's a really beautiful interview. If you can read it, I suggest you do. Christine does not do very many interviews. Hold on, let's see if we can pull it up a different way.
That's what makes it so significant, is that this is something that she does not do frequently at all. So I think that many people were calling this or breaking her silence, really, for a while. Like, she hasn't spoken publicly for
Yeah,
some
so
time.
she says, all I want for Christmas is my son Julian to be home safe with his family under the protection of his country, to be free from this 9-year unlawful and brutal political persecution, and to hear from the human rights abuses and torture which they have damaged his mind and his body. She said, our Christmases, and meaning talking about in the past, as probably Julian was growing up, were never boring. Julian would delight the children and the family with special Christmas performances. She does talk about a trick involving shaking down sparklers and putting them in the mouth of a T-Rex toy. And I actually saw somebody on Twitter did this. I'm assuming because of this article. So that was kind of a cool tribute to Julian today on Christmas. She does talk about him as a father too, and how devout and innovative and playful he was. And she talked, there's a picture of Julian as a toddler, and then Julian with his toddler son. Julian was a very young father who Christine Assange talks about, that he gave up going to university to help raise his son. Yeah, and then she goes on to say how she misses their family Christmases, and it hasn't been the same, that they haven't had a proper family Christmas since he was detained. And let me see if there's any other quotes here. If he ends up in the hands of the US, there will be a show trial, and there will be nothing fair or just about it. He will never see the light of day again. He is accused of engaging in multi-award winning journalism, not hurting anyone. And
so Steve right now has pulled up for you the photos that were in this article. They can be found. Yeah, so that's Julian when he was in Australia at home, I believe. Are there other pictures?
yeah, Steve, if you go to your Twitter DMs, there's screenshots of the article that Solitary Reaper just sent us screenshots of it, so we could show the photos that way.
I'll pull that up in a moment. Do. Wow, come on. I'm sorry, my computer's acting up.
You're
Okay.
fine. I was expecting the Jeopardy music to start playing.
Yeah, because it got quiet. But yeah, if you can,
You're muted, Christy.
you guys could check that article out on your
Okay,
phones, I believe.
There it goes. It's
Got it?
hamster wheeling. I'll let you know. God damn it, Kevin.
But something too I want to mention. Christine's talked about, like in a recent tweet, how this has now been removed from Google, like her interview. When you search Julian and things like that, this doesn't really come up anymore. So I think that that's important to point out too, that it's not just the governments that are going after him, it's the big tech agencies that enable the governments to behave this way.
So
Yeah.
everybody go find the article on her Twitter page and share it.
Yeah,
That
she
will
did
help
just
spread it
say
out.
that it's now coming back up in the Google searches about 3 hours after she tweeted that. So that's,
Yeah, everybody just still go find it
Yeah.
on her Twitter page and retweet it.
So here are the pictures from that article. That is, of course, Christine Assange and Julian when he was about 2 years old, I believe. I think it describes in the caption, but that is the two of them. Yeah,
He
Julian Assange.
really looks like his mom.
mhm.
He really does.
And his son here, that's Julian's first son. And how much Julian and his son look alike, you can see in these two photos.
Yeah, and that was from Christmas
Come on.
specifically.
Yeah.
And that's a picture
Aw.
of Christine, and then she's holding like a little snow globe of a photo of she and of Julian and her.
I believe that photo is from Christmas of 2010 after he was released from prison, I believe. But that was taken at Christmas time, that photo.
And that's another very famous photograph right after he was arrested, or when he was on his way to a hearing.
Yeah, that was, I think, maybe
Yeah.
early. I think that was maybe on the way to the bail charge hearing, maybe
Yeah.
in May, early May.
After his arrest, yeah. It's become that and another one too have become very like famous photographs almost.
Yeah.
So do check out that article. Do retweet it on Twitter. Christine Assange did retweet that article, and as Andrew was saying, it has been sort of blocked or not blocked, but if you looked up Julian Assange on Google, you would not find that article very easily. So do retweet it and do read the article.
Yeah, and I'm putting in the thank you, Solitary Reaper, again for another link of that article. But there isn't a paywall on this, so you can read it and see those photos as well.
Yeah, so it's been, of course, a difficult year. Of course, I think we all knew that he couldn't stay in that embassy forever. I remember always thinking this is gonna eventually end somehow, and I did not see it ending too well, but especially when they started to talk about the fact that they had some knowledge that this was going to take place within 7 days. They were right, and it happened, and it was a brutal arrest. If you have not seen that footage of him being dragged out of the embassy, you should see it. So I am seeing that we did get some donations again tonight. We have some more, so thank you guys again so much. Christy, do you want to read them?
Aline Tepper, let's see, there's a couple anonymous. Luciano Salalas, Drew Foes. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce this other name correctly. I'm really sorry. But thank you, everybody. Yeah, we're just got maybe like 4 or 5 that just came in.
Hey.
So this is amazing. So thank you so much. Please share. This shows that sharing on social media is helping us. Please continue sharing the link.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Please share, and we were so grateful.
Yeah, so this is really helping us. Like we said, we want to be really transparent with how we use the money, but we are planning for it to pay for plane tickets. And because we've had to kind of wait a little while until closer to the hearing to verify the dates, you know, sometimes plane tickets get more expensive the closer you book them. So we want to make sure we all have enough money to get our plane tickets or get our travel arrangements made. And if we can pay for lodging, and then anything left over just to pay for our stay in these cities or help with the actions that are planned and helping us stream to you guys and providing you with as much content as we can that week.
Yeah. So do we want to talk about, I know we wanted to talk about this upcoming decade. Do we want to get into that and maybe what we predict will happen in relation to Julian's case and maybe just the state of free speech and free press in the US and around the world? I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Steve, about this.
Oh man, God, we live in a cartoon. It's, you know, hard to make accurate predictions.
Or simulation. I was telling you guys.
No, look, yeah, look, I agree with you on that. I have a couple of different very early episodes of Slow News Day where we discuss simulation theory in detail. Um, and but that's a sidetrack. So is this strictly related to Julian Assange? This prediction?
No.
Because look, I think that the 2020 primary is going to be rigged. I think that there's a very good chance, barring a financial collapse, that whatever neoliberal empty suit warmonger they throw up against Donnie Johns is gonna get their little identity politics, virtue signaling ass handed to them. And I don't think that's a good thing because Donald Trump is the guy who brought forth 18 charges against Julian Assange in the first place. Yes, he picked up the baton from the Obama administration, but that's the point. You know, it is, and I agree with you guys that there's the last couple of months, it really seems like there's been a lot of positive movement towards, you know, people becoming aware of what's happening to Julian Assange. I only see that getting bigger and louder. I do. Um, I predict 500 to 1,000 people outside Belmarsh. And I would love to see more than that. I'd love to see tens of thousands of people in DC at, you know, various locations of import. But I mean, we've got some weird times coming. Like I said earlier, I don't see it getting any less absurd.
And we have pre-crime starting too.
Pre-crime starts next week.
Yep.
That's
And
going to be a shit show.
Do you think people like us, like activists and journalists who are reporting on Julian Assange and talking about this, do you think we're going to get caught up in pre-crime? I think journalists are going to get caught up in pre-crime if they are considering publishing, if word gets out that they may have information that is
like pre-espionage crime?
Yeah, like
Right?
pre-espionage crime.
That's insane. Possibly.
I mean, absolutely journalists will be targeted with it. Absolutely. The whole point, I mean, Trump came out the Monday after there were 2 shootings in one day and said the government needs the power to probe the deepest, darkest corners of the interwebs in order to stop these crimes before they happen. You know, this is the same party that claims to be for small government. This is the same guy that has a legion of followers in QAnon that believe he's a white hat. He just helped create pre-crime. He's persecuting Julian Assange. I, there, this is why I advocate no gods, no masters, stop making heroes out of politicians. It's people on the ground that are going to have to shame these guys into doing the right thing. And if they're incapable of shame, we threaten them with, you know, loss of power, their ability to legislate by whatever means that looks like. I would think we should surround the halls of power until we get our agency back. But, you know, other people think you should vote.
And what about the people we don't vote into power, like the military industrial complex and the deep state?
Well,
You
that's
know,
why what Susie's doing is so
exactly.
important. That's why taking that fight directly to them, you know, through court and in the media is what it's going to take. And I really love that you guys are part of her team over there, and helping to get that message out because it's incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as what I see happening, I don't know. I definitely agree with Steve that the election will be rigged. We see signs of that happening already, or like the setup to make that happen and it go unknown to the public or be unknown to the public. I honestly, I do worry that we're not going to get the people again because I don't want to attach any candidates to this movement, but I don't see us making any progress with that. I really don't. I really don't. Hence the election rigging that I was just talking about that I see probably happening. As far as Julian's case, this is a really tough one to make predictions about. Because it could take a really long time. I've gone back and forth with this, thinking, oh, they just want to get this process through. They want to get him to the US and they want this trial to go through now. But knowing the fact that they, you know, have to, or they can have the right to appeal, say if the extradition is granted, that's a whole process and they have the right to do that. That has to be honored. I know that all rule of law in this case has certainly been infringed upon, but something like that, they can't deny like an appeal. They really can't do that. I don't think they could get away with doing something that extreme. So this could take this could take years. It could go either way. I remember, you know, just a few months ago, we kept thinking that they were going to try to keep delaying this extradition hearing when in fact they've done everything they could to keep it at this February date. So it kind of was opposite of at least what I thought was potentially going to happen. But I think that this election is going to be more intense than 2016. I do think that. I didn't always think that, but after contemplating it more, I think we're in for quite a ride, a wild ride with this upcoming election. As far as how the decade's going to play out, I don't think I'm well versed in history to really give an informed guess of what that will look like. I feel like oftentimes it's very easy to think that technology is going to accelerate at a greater speed than what it actually does. I feel like throughout history, there's been predictions that have been made that have been a little more advanced than where we're actually at. But again, too, we know that very powerful people, the deep state, the intelligence agencies have technology that we probably can't even fathom, or we know that they have technologies that we obviously don't have access to. So again, I don't know if I'm too comfortable making a prediction on what's to happen in this upcoming decade, but I do foresee 2020 being a wild ride.
So, what I'd like to see out of the next decade, kind of to put a little bit of a different spin on it, what I'd like to see is as milestones of pushing back against this coming or now present dystopia. It would be things like municipal broadband, being instituted, publicly owned banks at a municipal level, where people control their infrastructure for their communities in a decentralized fashion, a ban on facial recognition, an end to the Patriot Act, and just an end to the authorization on the use of military force and U.S. aggression throughout the globe. I think that things like that in the coming decades and ending these crazy, crazy, crazy pre-crime laws and infiltration would be a sign that in this 10-year time we've actually gained ground against these techno tyrants, essentially.
Well, and there's some good organizations out there, and the stuff that Sean O'Brien is doing with Privacy Safe is really good work.
And fight for the
The
future.
conditions are ripe for all of that. Everything that you said.
And
There-
that's why in 2020 I want to get the Free Assange vigils to be more of a town hall thing, because then it can be less of talking about it and more of hey, there's people running for office that come and attend these vigils and understand what's happening on a global scale, but take care of their communities too.
And there's global static. There's protests in over 50 countries right now. And not the US and the UK, because when it comes to obedience,
I would disagree though. I would say 2019 is the year that protests really started reviving again, to the point that they have to stage mainstream protests because the overflow of people's frustration has become to the point that they can now commercialize it with pussy hats and the whatnot.
I love a parade. People do. People love a parade. They do. And if you can give them matching for it, even better. I love a parade. It's
I just wrote it
from a musical.
Okay, yeah, I thought so. I heard you say that and I was like, huh, I think we sang that in like middle school choir or something.
Rad.
Yeah.
Music Man? Is it Music Man?
I have no idea.
So yeah, I think I agree with Taylor on 2020 is going to be a hell of a ride, for more ways than one. I think for activism, for fighting for Julian, I think because we're beginning to operate, and we have been operating so far out of the rule of law, I think we might get surprised with how things get pushed one way or another in the appeals process of the extradition hearing. I worry that, I don't mean to sound all conspiracy, but I worry about the US snatching him up anyway and just, saying fuck it to the appeals process. I guess it depends on how bad the Trump administration wants to get him before the election or after.
So you think they would even maybe just say fuck it to the appeals process, even though that's like
I don't know, that might be a stretch, but
that's interesting. They might.
I don't think that that's really a stretch, because the way that they're treating his case right now is like it's a fucking like traffic crime. They're like, nope, rubber stamp, you're guilty, next one.
So like there's just no, the judges are just not even considering what is or trying to help the situation in Belmarsh. And so I'm kind of preparing for that like shock of what the hell is happening and what are we in for?
Just full daylight banana republic shit.
Right.
It's not going to get any less absurd. And as that happens, as the rule of law just gets flaunted and violated over and over and over in broad fucking daylight, people are going to be presented with a choice. And that choice is, do we continue to allow this to happen? Because it's not just going to be Julian Assange.
No. And it's, I don't think it's going to be made, I don't think as we go through primary season, I think it's going to be harder and harder to make our candidates listen and get them to talk about Julian Assange. Obviously, it has not been brought up on the debate stage, and I don't think it will, especially as we get closer to a Republican and a Democrat, Republican being Trump, but whoever the Democrat is, debating, or the vice president debates, they're not going to talk about this. They're going to be in agreement with each other on this, and Democrats aren't going to want to admit that they agree with something Trump is doing. We're going to probably.
So the only way we could get Julian Assange on the debate stage, that question asked, would be if it's done in a Code Pink style fashion, to where someone goes up there and asks the question. Like someone has the balls to walk up and grab the mic and say, what do you believe about the prosecution of Julian Assange?
I
and how
don't think you
end
could
it?
pass security.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You won't be able to pass security.
Even if you did, they won't answer the question. You can ask
Right.
it, but they won't answer it.
Yeah, I don't think you
Makes
could
us
get
look
past.
crazy.
I don't think
Go
you
to
could get.
commercial, go to commercial, go to commercial.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
would answer that question. There's not a
Right.
single person who would be on that stage that would answer that question.
Unfortunately, Tulsi
Greenpeace-
Gabbard was the one person we could count on to maybe bring him up in one of her answers, and that has not happened so far. I don't know if she's going to be participating in the January debate.
Multiple opportunities
She
to
did.
do so, by the
Yes.
way.
Yeah.
And she
Really
hasn't
disappointing.
been as outspoken as I think she should have been these last few months, with his declining health and approaching extradition hearing. We have
Efforts were made to get her to speak out. I know that
Yes.
Sophia has contacted her, actually spoke to
Dak
her in
has asked
person
her multiple times again.
after that hearing when he came out and looked so horrible. I mean, I tweeted at her, I called her office. I know Sophia spoke to her in person. We've asked her to, I know you've already spoken out, but do it again. Do it again.
Yeah,
We need
yeah.
you.
We've
Deb
asked
Lowe
her-
recently just asked her this past week in New
Mhm.
Hampshire, and it was recorded and on Twitter that her answer. Liz Sophia just said in the chat, imagine if she had spoke out for him at the debates. Imagine maybe what the conversation would have turned to.
Mhm.
I think we're going to see our media, specifically in the US, largely ignore the extradition hearing because of the impeachment hearing, whatever process that's going to look like, and the primary season. We're going to get bombarded with so much propaganda with this election. It's just going to be nauseating, and it's going to pit us against one another. And it worked in 2016, and it's going to go balls to the wall in 2020. Like, it's just, I can't wait for neighbors to hate each other again, because that's what 2016 did. It really
Oh,
made
that's already
people
happening.
hate each other.
That's
Yeah,
already
it is
happening.
happening, and it's just going to get worse. I mean, the day after the election, 2016, it just blew up relationships and friendships. And so
You can even see it in our chat, like the way that we'll openly criticize Bernie Sanders and Tulsi
Yes.
Gabbard. Like, I'm sitting here postulating, like, hey, should I say a criticism about Tulsi in regards to dropping out of the debate? Because I know that, not that I care that people will get pissed about it, but that it's like,
I deal
am I
with that
adding
on a
to the conversation?
regular basis because I criticize everybody. And if you criticize Tulsi, people think you're a Bernie supporter. If you criticize Bernie, people think you're a Tulsi supporter. And I don't support either one of them. So
that's why I hope we
come
can
for me
get.
or don't. I don't care. I'm going to criticize whoever I think needs criticized.
yeah,
I would
So-
hang
and that's how
posters
it
and
should
knock on
be.
doors.
That's how
That
it
is
should
how it
be.
should be. And if
We
you
should
have an
not
issue
make
with that, that's
celebrities
fine. I
out
don't
of our
care.
politicians.
Yeah.
And I think the
hate
best
I
way
hate
to
the
do-
celebrity culture as it is, but our politicians are not celebrities, and they should be held accountable, and they should be criticized to be better and to learn more.
Consistently, like
Yes.
criticize them consistently. As long as you're consistent and fair. I don't criticize Bernie for one thing and then let Tulsi slide on it. No, I
Right.
criticize them both equally on equal things. And everybody should do that. The cult of personality and having your little pet politician doesn't help anybody. And like,
No.
that's one of the biggest, like one of the most depressing things of the past few years has been watching people devolve into the thing they claimed they hated. Like,
Yes.
here you're holding up this politician on, this, like they're some kind of God, and they're not. And you used to claim to hate those people, and now you are one. Stop doing that. Hold them all accountable. They're not infallible. They're not perfect.
Yeah.
They're never going to be. Be
And we've-
consistent, be fair, Stop.
We've talked about the
holding-
candidates extensively on the show through this year, and we will
Mhm.
continue to do so. We will continue to hold them accountable, whoever the nominee is, for not standing up for Assange. And we've taken a lot of heat on, and I know some of our guests have taken heat on when we criticize, especially Bernie. That gets brought up a lot in our chat, and we've had to kind of say we are done with it. We've said our piece. You know, we're not going to change how we feel until the man says Julian Assange and actually gives a legit answer. So yeah, that is kind of dominated our shows at times, that conversation about the candidates and why we need to continue to push them to stand up for Assange.
I need to bring in my Bernie Sanders bobblehead so I can just have like evidence of like, no, like I was in the trenches fighting for him when he
Oh my
decided
gosh,
to
dude!
stop
I
being
have
the
a
general.
life-size cardboard cutout. I have
Wow.
the bobblehead. I used to be a hardcore Bernie Sanders supporter. He was always a compromise candidate for me, but I actually thought that he might have the balls to really fight the system. I really thought that he could maybe do that. He didn't, and that is what it is. But I'm that really doesn't matter, because even then I've always criticized him. So, and
Well, and
every
here's the
politician
thing.
should be criticized.
He believes that the system can work.
Yeah,
He believes fundamentally
that's the
in,
problem.
yeah, and I can't stress this enough. The pathway to neoliberalism starts with picking a candidate in the Democratic primary for president and then spending the rest of your life justifying their shitty words and fucking actions.
Yep.
And the way to avoid hating each other when we talk about political issues is don't talk about people at all. Identify by particular policies. Don't talk about isms. Don't talk about those intentionally built things to cause division where words are defined by different groups as different things.
Yeah,
So-
He's really missed an opportunity to potentially create a really strong third party in the U.S. He caved in
Absolutely.
and missed that opportunity, and I think it was a unique one because he still has so much sympathy from his like core base of supporters who, I'm not going to get into it, who of course will give him passes on certain issues, specifically when it comes to Julian Assange. But yeah, I mean, he totally missed an opportunity. But at first, I always actually thought about him in 2016 as somebody who was not necessarily going to cave. And I saw him as somebody who was actually not as easily manipulated, but I think that that's obviously been proven false.
Well, right,
Yeah.
watching him campaign for Hillary after that was, I mean, I wasn't a Bernie supporter and I was heartbroken for the Bernie supporters. Like, I just could not believe he was bowing down and kissing the ring over and over and over. It wasn't just one. It was, I don't know, what did he do? 30
And
campaigns?
it was
39
crazy to
events.
see. It was
And
crazy to see.
Criticize him for taking a fucking airplane. Be like, oh, you're the environmental candidate. Like Democrats, centrists.
Right.
They're like, you're the environmental candidate with a Green New Deal. Spent a lot of time on airplane. He was going to shill for herself. Like,
It was crazy to see some people who did not like Hillary at all and like did not like her at all, despised her, who supported Bernie. And then of course, once he, was cheated, he's out of the race, they were all about Hillary. It was great. It was a crazy thing.
Yeah,
Crazy. I don't know. I'm sure I've seen that with so many of my friends. I don't know if you guys have seen this.
The team sport that is politics was very evident in that election, that they had to vote for Hillary. And I mean, you had celebrities, like Sarah Silverman, who was, yelling at people at a live event about how the Bernie people just need to get over it and vote blue no matter who. And, that whole mantra started, and it just,
look,
it's
not just Sarah Silverman. It's damn near every single media outlet, quote unquote, independent or otherwise. Like, there were not a lot of people who were speaking out against this, and some of them made their bones because of it. and now just cover the horse race because that's what's making them money. But there was a legitimate reason to go, hey, look, this was bullshit, and here's why. We have the documents. We can go and look at them in WikiLeaks right now. Elizabeth Voss was talking about this on Sunday on my show. Like 2016 will something like that will probably not happen again, where as it's happening in real time, we have access to all of the available information proving just how rigged it was. You know, and again, people were presented with a choice, and 88% of the people who voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary voted for herself.
That's so depressing.
Yeah.
That's really
And
depressing.
I found this out when the guy who founded Bernie or Bust was on Slow News Day. The majority of that 12% voted for Trump rather than voting for Jill Stein or abstaining or writing Bernie in or writing somebody else in. So at least 7% of that number voted Trump just to spy as a spite fuck, I would imagine.
That's literally what I was thinking about when I was going to get some water right now. It was like I had a friend who was a Trump supporter or who was a Bernie supporter that then flipped because of the open rigging. And he was like, no, this guy's going to fight back against it.
Yeah, but again, we are just going to be holding the candidates accountable. Hopefully, this could eventually be addressed. Like Christy was saying, I'm not sure I see it being addressed. So, is there any other news or important dates that we want to talk about? I know that in January, there will be a few court appearances or hearings that will be taking place.
Yeah, there's one on the 23rd, and I think there is one before that too.
I think it's the 14th.
I was thinking the 14th or around there. But yeah, so there'll be two more, and I'm sure probably even another one in February before we are actually at the extradition hearing. But we're getting close. We're getting very close, and I don't know. You never know what's going to be decided at these case management hearings, if anything will be moved or changed or more solidified on exactly when the preceding weeks will happen after it initiates on the 24th.
Yeah, so any more news that we want to touch on or any important dates that we want to talk about? We will be having a show next week. Like I said earlier in the vigil, we landed on both holidays. So we will be having an episode on New Year's Day at the normal time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will only be able to be on for an hour, as I will be on a lovely trip that I am very much looking forward to. So I'm sorry, I love you guys very much, but I do want to have that time on vacation. So I will be with you for at least an hour at the least, but we will be having this vigil talking about okay, somebody else please.
So I was just going to mention that the vigil next week is our 6-month vigil.
And it's at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to do it Bloody Mary brunch style.
I like that idea.
I'm kidding. That's not going to happen, but because that would be 6 a.m. for me. That would suck.
Yeah, no, I couldn't do that.
Please join us. We will be. We'll have stuff to, talk about, and we'll be.
I just think it's cool that we got to do so many different holidays this year, just being on a Wednesday.
We have hit a couple of holidays.
Because our 25th vigil is on the 25th of December.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So yeah, please support us in the new year. Share our GoFundMe link, donate if you can, subscribe to our YouTube page, follow us on Twitter. We are really looking forward to being able to push the independent media envelope as we get towards the extradition hearing to getting more people, hopefully if they see that we're covering it, they will also cover it. And we will be having a show with Gordon Dimmick on January 12th. That's a Sunday. I believe we are starting. I think, Steve, are we starting at your normal time? The Slow News Day starts?
Oh, yeah. No, that will be 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And if we go over 2 hours on that day, I don't care.
Yeah, we'll be lining up. We are lining up guests, and we'll be doing a lot of different Assange type topics as we're fundraising for the extradition hearing for us to cover it. Yeah, and Andrew and I will be in DC on December 6th. No, excuse me, January 6th.
January.
So that is coming up really quick, and we're really excited to talk to Lee Camp. It will be on Redacted VIP. Hopefully we will, I'm not sure as far as if we'll get to share it since it is for his VIP show, but we will be working with Lee in DC in February too.
I had hoped to set up a camera to go live on our YouTube channel, like from not our point of view, I guess,
Right.
but from us there at the same time as
Yes.
him.
Yeah, I think we can pull that off.
I think we can handle it.
Yeah. So I'm excited
Very
to get
cool
to
stuff.
actually meet Andrew. I'll get to meet Andrew for the first time.
Mhm.
So we'll get to have two hosts together, and hopefully in 2020 maybe we will actually have all four of us
Yeah.
host together in one location. Don't know where that will be yet.
Yeah, I would really love for all four of us to get together and actually meet each other and do like a live vigil somehow. It would be so cool.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. We'd have to, of course, figure out where, since we are all over the country pretty much, and we're in all
Have to
different
meet
time
in
zones.
Colorado. Like that.
Yeah.
That's what we'd have to do. We'd have to go
Go to
like
Colorado. Yeah.
Midway Point, and
Well, we have some friends in Denver.
That's
yeah.
true.
Yeah, we do. We do have
I
friends in
used
Denver.
I've lived in a few different places in Colorado. It was a long ass time ago, but I'm familiar with the state. And
All right. So Misty, thank you so much for coming on. Before we close out, I want to give you a moment to give your last thoughts, anything that you want to leave us with, and then also do let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter. Misty posts the funniest stuff on Twitter. If it's not hilarious, it is some really hard truths. So I do recommend following her. She's awesome. So again, Misty, thank you so much for joining us. And 2019 in general, this is our last episode of the year. It was a fantastic year. Well, I mean, there were a lot of bad things that happened, but I mean, thinking about the fact that we created this together, I met the four of you. That's been great, and I'm really glad we've been able to kind of build this together. And yeah, so thank you for coming on, and do leave us with your last thoughts.
Yeah, just thank you guys for having me on your last show. It was really cool of you guys to invite me. It was awesome to meet you and Andrew in Chicago. I'm really glad that, I mean, when I first saw you guys, I found you guys because Unity for Jay was ending, and I saw you guys were picking up the mantle. I think I was like one of your first 20 followers on Twitter. So it makes me like mama proud to watch you guys grow and do what you're doing, and it's really cool. And also just one more thing, if you guys want to support Julian, this book is super rad. It's called In Defense of Julian Assange, and it's a collection of like essays and articles by like Margaret Kimberly and Chris Hedges, Noam Chomsky, John Pilger, and all of the royalties from the book go to the Courage Foundation, which will help Julian with his defense fund. But
Would you be down to do a book club with that book with us at some point?
That would be
Absolutely.
fun. That'd be
Me?
awesome.
Like, I'm such a big nerd, dude. I already have like I have highlighted pages and notes in the margins, and yeah, so yeah, totally. But seriously, it's an excellent book. There's some really good stuff in there from a lot of incredible minds, and it's such a good read. And it'll help like reinvigorate and refocus your efforts on Assange. It really like kind of hammers home why it's important to fight for him. So yeah, I'm totally down for the book club. Thank you guys for having me on again. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, that's about. Oh, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, caution, because yes, I am. I would say slightly controversial on Twitter sometimes.
She's one of my favorite people to follow.
Some people love me, lots of people don't. So fair warning, but it's at Sarcasm Stardust if you're interested. Follow, and if you don't like it, unfollow. No harm, no foul. So yeah, that's it. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much,
you.
Misty.
Thank you, Misty.
And I also want to thank our other guests who joined. So I guess I'll close it, close out. I'll start. I want to thank our other guest who also joined us, Kendra Christian. Thank you so much for coming on. I also got to meet her and work with her when I was in Denver. She's great to work with. The whole Denver crew is awesome. I really enjoyed working with them and meeting them. So again, this is our last episode of the year. I'm really glad that we were able to do this and come together despite it being a holiday. All of us today were talking about this and how we were counting down the hours to this vigil because we were so excited to do it. And we thank you guys for joining us on this holiday. Do join us next week too. And of course, we'll be posting about that as we always do. So thank you. And if you have not subscribed to our channel, please subscribe. Hit the bell so you know when we go live. And if you have already subscribed, double check that you are still subscribed. My name is Taylor Hudak. You could follow me on Twitter at _Taylor Hudak. And I'm really thankful that we were able to create this vigil together and very happy to have met the three of you. One of you in person, of course, but two of you in this cyber world or whatever. So yeah, it's been great, and I'm so happy that we started to do this. So thank you guys.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. And I just, on Christmas, want to remind everyone that Jesus will forgive genocide.
My name is Christy Doff. You can follow me on Twitter at Christy Doff. Please share our GoFundMe link if you have donated. Thank you so much. If you can donate to us in the new year, we would love it. Yeah, this has been an amazing 25 weeks of shows. We have created something very awesome here together. I'm so thankful for meeting all of you, and I can't wait to meet you in real life in person in 2020. And so we hope you all will stick around as we kick off the new year next week.
My name is Steve Poikinen. I host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find here on the YouTubes at youtube.com/C/Slow News Day podcast. I do whatever I can to avoid using mainstream content as the baseline material for my show, and if I can, I will interview the independent journalists that write the articles that I use on my show. I interview people that are way smarter than me so that I can learn stuff, and I hope that the people that watch the show learn stuff too. Thank you everyone for being a part of this. With we love you guys, and to my co-hosts, you guys rock. It's been all but a week of 6 months, which is crazy. And I think it's important to remember that on this day we celebrate the birth of a baby boy who was born of a virgin, who would grow up to have 12 disciples, and he would be killed, and he was resurrected 3 days later. So happy birthday, Mithra.
I was waiting for it.
That was great.
Happy birthday, buddy.